Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Amateur Experts Podcast. I am your host, Landon Oliver, here with my co host, Andrew Scott.
Yes, sir. What's good?
What's going on, man? How's it going?
Good, man. Ready to talk some football, because football season is over, which means football season is starting.
Yeah, it never
So
ends. It's a year round tradition.
yeah, that's right. So I'm ready to get into some football, man.
Well, yeah, we'll definitely get into that. And, maybe if time permits, we got some NBA stuff we'll kind of hit on as well. So, for all you basketball fans, I don't want you to feel left out. Um, but before we do get started, I do want to say rest in peace for the Vincent Jackson news that broke today. Rest in peace to Vincent Jackson.
Yeah,
Obviously nobody knows what exactly happened, but it's just a terrible situation. Only 38 years old, still a really young
way too
guy,
young. Yeah.
and it's just awful. He was such a great player, during his
hmm
prime years, and he's definitely somebody that community I know for sure in Tampa. He did a lot of community work around there. They'll definitely miss him, and just condolences go out to his family and friends and both organizations. For the Chargers and the Buccaneers and all them. So, rest in peace, Vincent Jackson. Thank you for the many years of entertainment, and you know, let's move on to some
Absolutely.
some some better some better things to talk about. Also, by the way, in case you happen to live in Florida or like the one other area in the United States that isn't like 0 degrees right now, um, there could possibly be some little audio issues. We're gonna try to clean it up as best as we can, but my furnace has been running pretty much nonstop. Every time I hear it kick on, my wallet just tightens up a little bit more because I know I'm about to get just like blasted. Um, so yeah, we're gonna try to keep the noise to a minimum, but it's literally like single digits, like negative, wind chill outside my house right now. And as much as I love, you guys that listen to this, I like heat also. So you're just gonna have to deal with it. Um, So, all right. Well, like you said, you were ready to get into some football. So now that we got, those things out of the way, let's get into some football. We got some pretty big news that broke this weekend, and it does kind of tie into our free agency now because JJ Watt was released from the Houston Texans. They didn't trade him. They didn't get anything of value for him because they're the Houston Texans. Um, so uh, yeah, that's definitely a era coming to an end there. A very productive era for him personally, not necessarily for the team. I mean, they won the division a few times. You know, they definitely underperformed in the playoffs. And then of course, we know what happened last year and the situation that's going on there now. It's just a
Yeah.
complete clusterfuck, to put it lightly. But it's definitely kind of been hard on him, I'm sure, to just kind of waste away there. So I'm pretty excited that they actually just let him go and he's able to kind of choose where he's going to go. He's able to possibly, you know, pick a contender, maybe actually do some winning for some deep playoff runs for once in his career. It's going to be pretty exciting. And I know obviously he's not the player he was, 5, 6 years ago, because age, and he's had some pretty significant injury history as well. But he's still an extremely productive player. Uh, so, what about where you think JJ ends up? And don't say the Rams. Don't say the Rams. I know you're gonna say the Rams.
I don't think it's. I wish it would be the Rams. I don't think it's going to be the Rams. I don't think they're
That
the most likely. Hey,
dude,
they had like the fifth best odds whenever he got released,
that would be so
and the
sick.
the betting odds got released. So it's not insane, but I definitely think there are a couple teams that would be favorites ahead of those guys. Though number one for me being the Green Bay Packers. Um, I think he would go back home, and the reason I think it's the Packers over what I'm assuming most other people have is the favorite being the Steelers. Having the chance to play with his brother, possibly both brothers.
Both
I don't know if the
brothers.
other one's a free
Yeah.
agent or not. Um, but that opportunity is obviously, for JJ would be something cool to do. But I think this request and this move was about winning, and I think that Green Bay gives him the best chance to do so, where considering all things like the fit and the need and things like that. Um, I think Green Bay checks all those boxes the most. Like I think that if he goes to the Packers, that elevates them another level to where it's like really hard to think they're not going to be back in it. Where the Steelers, like, I don't have enough trust in Big Ben at this point to say if they get JJ Watt now, I think they're going to go win a Super Bowl. And, but JJ might not feel that way and he might go play with his brothers. But I think that it's going to be the Packers, though.
Yeah, that's kind of where I land also. I think Green Bay just offers him the best all around talent, winning. He gets to go home, be close to his family. I know his wife, I believe, is now in Chicago. She got traded from Houston to Chicago because she's a soccer player, and
Oh, yeah.
so I know she got traded from Houston. Um, Let me look up where she plays right now.
I think you're right. I think it is Chicago.
Yeah, let me see here.
Because
Yeah, the
I
Chicago
remember
Red
reading like
Stars.
a
Yeah,
yeah, so I remember reading a JJ Watt article after he got released, and
yeah. So I mean, and obviously, that's not a
they had
super
had that as a
far.
potential
That's
destination because of
yeah,
that.
that's not a super far drive. Pittsburgh's obviously a far away from Chicago. So, plus, I mean, with Pittsburgh, like, obviously they're kind of tied up with the cap. They need to, they just lost Pouncey, which everybody kind of knew, that was going to happen. So they need offensive line, they need receivers. I think they need a running back. They need to focus more on their offense this season than they do their defense. They already have an elite defense. So I don't know if they'll necessarily spend the money just to kind of shore up a position that they don't really need, like to be honest, because that defensive line is already one of the best in the league. And I know, like, it's always nice, to you add a multiple time All Pro and 3-time defensive MVP. Um, anytime you can add them, you want to, but I think if it's going to take away from the offensive side of the ball, which is where they need the help, I don't think they make the move. As cool as it would be to see, 3 Watts, lining up, somewhere there in black and gold, but um, for me, it's definitely the Green Bay Packers who would be the favorite, and I think he would fit a need for their defense. He would possibly he's not going to command as much money as what people are going to think he is, just because he's not that player that he was 5 years ago, but he's still an extremely productive player. I think he can still play at a Pro Bowl level. I just don't think he's playing at an MVP level anymore. Um, and then
And
it's an opportunity to go home, and there's too much good things. But I mean, we know how football goes too. So knowing how football goes, he'll probably sign with like the fucking Bills or Dolphins or New England. Like it's gonna be somewhere, that nobody thinks of, and he just ends up, you know, pulling up there, and who knows football.
yeah, and honestly, man, I think with as much money as he's made up to this point, with with not doing very much winning, um, I do think too on the money side of things, I think if he has a particular one or two teams picked out that, they might be kind of cash strapped, but they're obviously in the window to win a Super Bowl, and that's where he wants to go. I think he'd be willing to make the money work just to get where he wants to go, and kind of control his destiny on that too. So um, it wouldn't be surprising to me, to see him go to a team that doesn't have a lot of money to spend. But Green Bay just makes the most sense.
Yeah. So we'll kind of keep an eye on that situation, and obviously we'll discuss it whenever a move finally gets made. Um, so
But
heading over.
Les Snead's crazy. You're going to get some JJ Watt to the Rams notification over
Oh
like
yeah,
sometime over the next couple of days. They're going to pull it off somehow.
yeah. I mean, and it's not going to be like a cheap price either. It's be like they signed JJ Watt to a 2-year, $43 million contract, and
Yeah, they'll somehow make the cap
yeah,
numbers work
yeah,
though.
and everybody's like, "How's that even possible?" It's like the cap doesn't exist.
It doesn't matter as much as people think.
No. Um, so now we can kind of get into some actual other free agents that have basically been free agents we knew they were coming up. So obviously the clear one, we started the quarterback as always in football. You start the quarterback.
Yeah, we can just end the podcast after we talk about quarterbacks.
Yeah,
That's all
just
that matters.
we can just hit quarterbacks. The big one out there is Dak Prescott.
Hmm.
Don't think he's going anywhere. I think they're going to tag him again, which sucks for Dak. It any chance you can get away from the Cowboys. This isn't 30 years ago, so they've been pretty inept for a very, 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 very long time. Uh, he's just gonna Big Jerry is just gonna keep making them moves, paying them running backs and
Yeah, I mean, I feel like if they were smart, they would go ahead and just sign him to an extension now. But instead, I agree. I think they'll franchise tag him. He'll ball out and he'll cost probably at least 10 million a year more than what he probably could be signed for right now, considering the price that goes up every year for quarterbacks and him being I haven't looked at the 2022 free agents, but once they do tag him and he hits the market, I'm sure he'll probably be close to, if not the best quarterback on the market again next year. And if they try to tag him again, it's I mean, it's almost impossible. I think the cap hit's like 50 million at that point. So,
yeah,
um, I think he signs a 1-year deal this year if they aren't smart enough. And then at that point, I think it'll be in his hands if he decides to want to stay with Dallas or walk or not, because there is no more franchise tag after that. So,
yeah.
but yeah, I think he's back in Dallas next year, no question.
Yeah, so I think we both agree on that, and then from there it just gets
It's very top heavy.
it's yeah, as in there's one
One guy.
there's one guy.
I mean, I think too, but I'm a little biased because I've always liked him. I don't think Jameis Winston is in Dak Prescott territory, but I think he is a quarterback that if I don't have an answer at quarterback, if I can't get Dak Prescott and if I have no other answer, that's where I want to go, man. Because I mean, even if you lose some games, you will have a fun time.
That's
um,
true.
you know,
He got that lazy.
I think he's a good bridge quarterback if you are still looking for your guy, and he's a guy you can take a shot on, and find out if that 2020 vision that he just got surgically implanted, helped out or not. See if that really was part of the problem. Um, and I think he's got a really good shot to be the starter in New Orleans next year. And for us to really at that point, you've got a great play calling head coach. You've got great playmakers around you. Like now we're going to find out, is Jameis anything at all?
Yeah,
Um, so I don't know.
I'm not
I have
really
to.
that big on Jameis.
I can't not talk about James when we get to quarterbacks. I just like him too much, and I get that he's a turnover machine and stuff like that. But I liked him a lot whenever he was coming out of college, and then for all the bads. I just like watching the guy play football. It's entertaining. So I can't not talk about him and
It
bring him
is.
up because I do think that I think there is a really good chance outside of Dak. I think he has the best chance of the guys on this list to be a starter next year. So.
Yeah, and then obviously there's another Dallas Cowboy. Andy Dalton is up there. We'll kind of see what happens with him. A lot of these guys are just kind of like
I
whatever.
really think pretty much Andy Dalton, Fitz, Jacoby, Tyrod, Cam. I think all those guys are backups.
Oh,
Like
no, Jacoby's not a backup. I don't think.
because he's gonna end up starting for the Colts this
Yes,
year. Is that what you're saying? I hope not for your sake. I
yes.
think
I've
Trubisky.
already just
Um,
kind of just accepted the fact that it's going to happen. I've been telling people online that it's going to happen because I get all these posts and stuff like from the Colts, on Twitter and like all of course the Twitter mob and all those people that they're just like, who's the Colts starting quarterback? And they're like, is it Russell Wilson? Is it Sam Darnold? Is it Carson Wentz? And then I can always comment underneath them with just a GIF of Jacoby, and I'm like, I said, y'all
you
are
already know who it's
you're
gonna
all
be.
wrong. Oh yeah. Which I mean, in all honesty, I might rather have Jacoby over Carson Wentz. So that's
No, I highly disagree there, but
that's where I am with that.
um, before I mean, there's some new rumors to talk about with him, so I'm glad you kind of brought that up. But as far as Trubisky goes, the last one that we know is a free agent right now, that we hadn't really touched on. I do think he will get signed to compete for a starting job somewhere like Washington or the Broncos or the Saints if if Breeze doesn't come back and they don't go the Winston route, I think he will be brought in to compete. I don't know how high the chances are that he wins the competition, depending on who he signs with. But I do think he's at that point where he's at least going to get brought in to compete for a job somewhere and then probably end up being a backup. But
Yeah,
it'll be one of those like Marcus Mariota things where he comes in as like one of the more expensive backups in the league.
yeah, and he shouldn't. He shouldn't
he,
be.
he shouldn't he shouldn't demand that much money, but
No. Well, I mean, I know. I mean, it's the quarterbacks, so
mhm.
it is what it is.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, just looking, man, this list is depressing. So can we please move on?
So before we move on to a different position, we
Oh,
can go ahead and talk about there's been a few trade rumors here lately. The one we just kind of alluded to is that the Colts have offered reportedly 2 second-round picks for Carson Wentz. Is that correct? That's the deal on the
two
table.
second rounds and a future third/fourth, I guess, depending on uh, you know, what
Yeah,
happens.
and you know what, man? I
Mm,
don't blame him for offering it, and I'd do it. And I think you guys would be better off for doing it if y'all
yeah.
could get Carson Wentz without giving up a first-round pick.
I
But
would do it for a third and a future third. And then I
you
would
wouldn't even give up 1 second.
no.
Oh man, no,
Dude, like
you're tripping.
so even since we talked about him last time, like I've went and watched some more stuff, like especially like the last couple years. Oh man, no.
You go back and watch any stuff from the Frank Reich year to
Oh,
compare
the
what you might be getting. Like,
2017.
yeah, I know it's been a little bit, and
Yeah,
it's been a couple injuries since. But did you go back and watch any of that
I
though?
remember watching them back then. Like, I mean, I haven't really watched 2017 just because it's like it's almost irrelevant right now because I mean, as great as Frank Reich is, like, I don't know if he's gonna be able to fix like
He's
if
definitely a different player than he was in
yeah,
2017. A
exactly.
lot's
Like if
happened
he's
since
not getting
then.
2017
But
Carson
I'm
Wentz,
just saying
his mechanics are just
but Carson Wentz's
decision
system
making
around him
is
hasn't been
awful.
like Wentz hasn't had a situation around him like the one he had since 2017.
Yeah,
Ever
and see,
basically
and
since
I don't want to spend that. I
2017.
don't want to spend the price on a quarterback that needs the perfect situation to be successful. I want a
I
guy
mean, he
that
wasn't at that time. He wasn't just being successful. He was going to win league MVP.
yeah, well, that team also won with Nick Foles, and we see how that's worked out in Chicago. So, I mean,
Right? Yeah, I think Nick Foles
yeah,
sucks. I'm
yeah,
just
that's what
saying,
I'm saying
like,
is like it's such a slippery slope because then not only do you give up those picks who could be young players that turn into great players. And if you haven't looked at Chris Ballard's drafting from the second round and third round since his career started, like that's where the guy hits on all these guys. The Okarikis, Jonathan Taylor, Darius Leonard, all Julian Blackman, all these guys are second and third round picks. And if you're telling me right now that would I rather have Darius Leonard, Bobby Okereke, and Julian Blackman, or for pennies on the dollar, or would I rather have Carson Wentz for $20+ million a year? I
oh,
would
there's some
definitely.
hypothetical, built into that too, because it's not guaranteed you're going to find that level of players
Yeah,
in the
well, yeah,
second
I get
round
that, but
every single
he's done it
year.
every is Like, I mean, it's every single year. Like
But
the
is there a single GM ever that's had 100% second round success rate? 100%.
Well, I mean, he's also. I mean, he's had multiple. Yeah,
I'm just
yeah,
saying
I
that
get
that's
it.
going
But
to.
but I would rather put my money on Chris Ballard's track record hitting on those players than I would hoping that Frank Reich can somehow finally magically fix Carson Wentz's.
Hey man, I guess Chris Ballard doesn't really agree since he sent them,
Well,
reportedly sent them seconds for
allegedly,
Wentz.
and then allegedly, there's a report that came out today that from like one of the Philadelphia guys, like a beat writer in Philly, that offer was not actually put on the table, and that there hasn't been a better offer put on the table, which is why he hasn't been traded because apparently he wants to go to the Colts. So like he wants to come to Indy. Indy is not willing to give up that much, and so we'll see. I mean, you never know what the compensation is. Like, I mean, you hear, this and this and this, and I mean, I've heard Chicago, is offered. I saw what was it? Chicago offered a first round this year and then a
Oh,
second
the one that
yeah,
Tariq
Tariq
Cohen was. Yeah,
Cohen.
well, Tariq Cohen came out himself and said that that wasn't
Yeah,
true. So I mean, we
exactly. I
knew
mean,
that that one
but I
wasn't.
mean that's a
The
Bears beat
one that,
writer with a big blue check mark by their name.
yeah, I'm just the Colts report hasn't been challenged at all really yet. Um,
Well, I mean, it
so
was just one person that said it.
I know I'm just saying like there was immediate confirmation that that one was smoke with the Bears, and with the Colts that one's been lingering for a little while now.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, I don't think Ballard would offer 2 second rounders. Like, I don't see it. Just
I
because,
just like I don't,
I
and I
think
don't want
he's
this to
much
come
more
off
likely.
as.
He is much more likely, in all honesty, like to instead of giving up that, and there's also a report that's come out that, and I can't remember who's the one it came out. It was actually one of like the bigger name guys, but that the Colts don't view it as a long term thing. They view it as just a 2 year marriage, and then they would get out of the contract after 2 years, and then obviously you see what happens. But they weren't viewing it as like they trade all these picks for Wentz, and then Wentz is just automatically our starter for the next 10 years. So I
Well, no,
don't
I mean
think
it's only
I don't
two
I don't
second
think if
rounders,
they
right?
I think if they view him in that light where they think that they have to fix him, and then that it could also just be a 2 year rental. I think if you're viewing a player like that, you're not going to give up a shit ton for him, which is why I don't think a deal has been made. I think a lot of this is the media, and I think a lot of it is Philadelphia coming out and trying to leak stuff saying like, oh, well, we want this, we want this. Oh, well, the Colts offered this. What can the Bears do? Oh, well, the Bears not want to play ball. Well, then we're just going to hold on to him, because there's a lot of those, reports too, that if they don't get, the first round pick, that they're not going to trade him. And I think that's just horseshit. Because I mean, there's no way you're keeping that guy on your roster at this point. And then also too, like, you haven't even heard anything from Carson Wentz. Like, the dude's just been ghost. Like, he doesn't exist. Like, all this is going on, and he just has nothing to say. Um, so I mean, we'll see. I'm hoping it doesn't happen. Honestly, I think much more likely Chris Ballard is willing to take those 3 picks or whatever and package it with a future first rounder and our first rounder this year, and move up into the top 5 to get you know a guy like Justin Fields or Zach Wilson, or somebody he's talked about um, to the media. I mean, he's talked about these guys, that he wants somebody that is dynamic like that at the quarterback position. So I think that's much more likely. I think a trade up is much more likely than the Colts giving up a ton of stuff for Carson Wentz. I think it's just a lot of smoke coming from Philadelphia.
I mean, I think that would be the smarter move for the Colts too. And like, I don't want this to sound like I'm like pumping up Wentz as like a top 5 or even top 10 quarterback or anything like that. I just think with as important as the quarterback position is in football, and with the way Wentz showed you how he could play, before the injuries, whenever he was in Frank's system, whenever he actually had an offensive line and weapons, even things that quarterbacks need to be successful in the NFL, with this being this big team sport that we're always talking about.
Yeah.
Um, I just think that you guys have that set up to where if anybody is going to get the old Carson Wentz, if anybody, you had to pick one team in the league that says, if we send him here, maybe we see the old Carson Wentz. The Colts is at the top of that list, and I'm not sure there's very many teams, below them that need a quarterback. So
No,
I just
I
think the
agree. I
Colts make
agree
the
with
most
that.
sense. But and I don't think with you're talking about trading 2 years of picks for a guy that's a clear 2 year rental, where if things don't work out, his contract's really cuttable after that. So from that aspect, that's why with there being no first round picks involved, that's why I don't think it's really that bad, because yes, Chris Ballard has hit on second round picks, but they are still risky. And I think it's, with it being the quarterback position and Wentz showing what he's shown to this point before the injuries and things, I think it's worth the risk to not have a second round pick for the time that you're going to have Wentz. And if it doesn't work out, you can cut bait after 2 years easily. You've got your picks back, second rounders, all of them, and
And you've
and
wasted
now,
2 years.
yeah, you've lost 2 years, but I like.
That's what he said in that press conference. Like, is he said, I'm not gonna make a move on a quarterback. He said, yeah, like, if I make a move on it, it'll get y'all off my back. But you know, if things don't work out, I'm the first one out that door. He said it's not about getting a quarterback, it's about getting the right quarterback.
Mhm.
And I just don't think, I mean, look, if they were that damn convinced that Carson Wentz is going to be the answer and he's going to be, that quarterback, as Chris Ballard referred to, do you not think a deal would have already been worked out? I mean, there's been so much smoke. There's been so many reports
Yeah.
around it. It would have been done if they viewed
Right.
him.
I mean, yeah, I don't think the Colts or anybody views Wentz as like the franchise savior or anything,
Yeah,
you know.
and I don't
But
think Chris Ballard's willing to bet his job on that. I don't see it. I've watched the dude. I've listened to the guy for multiple years. I mean, and if it does end up happening, then everything he said has been, proven wrong. But he's always been one of the most open GMs in the league. He's always been extremely honest in things that he says. Um, he's always practiced what he's preached. And I think if he trades assets for a guy like Carson Wentz, who's a humongous question mark, um,
mhm. Yeah, he is.
then it goes against everything that I think he said. Now, on the flip side of that, he does say that he trusts Frank. Um, and if Frank bangs the table for a guy, then he's willing, to go get him. And because they have that kind of relationship, it happened with Philip Rivers last year. Everybody said Philip Rivers was shot. Oh, he threw 20 interceptions. Philip Rivers is, burnt toast. He's nothing. Frank said, I know this guy. I think I can get him back playing at a great level. Let's get him in here. Both sides, it worked out. And, obviously we wish Phil was coming back for another year, but we see how that happened and it worked out. I mean, obviously it didn't really work out because we didn't host the Lombardi, but at the same time, I mean, I think it was a very successful relationship, between Rivers and the Colts. So I do think if there is one team that Wentz can get back to that former glory with, it is us. But it's just I don't think they're going to be. Somebody's going to come in and overpay. It happens for quarterbacks. It happens. Every quarterback deal, there's always a team that nobody hears about being involved, and they're just going to come in and throw all these picks, and they're going to and that's what Philadelphia is waiting for. That's why he hasn't been moved, is because Philly is waiting for that one team to come in and say, well, we'll give you a couple first rounders, sure. And then boom, like, you know, there you go.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of what they're waiting on. But they don't have much longer to wait because beginning of March is when that guarantee hits for his contract for this year. So I think he's going to be moved sooner rather than later. It honestly wouldn't surprise me at all to see it be this week. But we'll see what happens. I don't see it being us. If it does, color me shocked. Obviously, if it does, we'll get on here and talk about it. And like I said, you can call me a turncoat all you want. Like I'll support the guy. I like obviously it's like the president thing. Like sorry to get in on this soapbox, but like whenever whoever's president and everybody shits on him all the time, they're like, well, he's an idiot. Like, why do you want your president to fail? Like, because that means our country fails. I don't want my quarterback to fail. I don't want him to suck because that means my team sucks. So like obviously I'm going to support the dude regardless. I just personally don't think it would work out that well. I just don't think he's the player he was 3 years ago. Or I don't think he really is. I don't think he's the player he was 2 years ago. I think he's regressed every season, and it's it is what it is. So let's get on to some wide receivers. Let's get off these damn quarterbacks. The game does not revolve around damn quarterbacks. There's other positions too. And one of the most exciting positions and one of the great positions in free agency this year. If you are in need of a wide receiver, it's a good year. So we have some free agent wide receivers here. We'll just go down the list. Obviously, starts with the top two. Allen Robinson and Chris Godwin are the two big ones. And then it says number 3 here. It says Juju and then Kenny Galladay, but I would definitely have them flipped. I would definitely have Galladay above Juju.
I agree.
And in all honesty, I'd probably have Will Fuller above Juju. um,
I Juju would be team dependent for me.
yeah,
Juju would definitely for teams that like 100% need a slot receiver. Juju would be 4 for me above Will Fuller,
yeah.
because he is so good in the slot. He's still decent on the outside, but sometimes a little more questionable. But in the slot, he always performs. So if like you're a team and you need a slot receiver, I would still like just as a team, regardless of team need, like if I have a chance to sign A-Rob, Chris Godwin, or Galladay, that's what I'm going for. But that's kind of where 1 and 2
Well, so
A-Rob and
if you,
Godwin are 1 and 2, like by themselves up there, and then you've got Galladay, and then another small gap, and then I think that's where it's Juju and Will Fuller,
if I
and
guaranteed you, if I could guarantee you, Will Fuller played 16 games next year, guaranteed, would you have him higher?
yeah, probably.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
my reason for not having him higher
I
is all
know,
those
I
things that
know.
you can't guarantee. But
Yeah,
yeah, whenever he's on the field, he's absolutely incredible. But like most teams, if you want him to be on the field for you, you're gonna have to give him a decent amount of money.
yeah,
And Juju, like I said, team dependent wise, if I know I need an elite slot receiver, I'd feel a lot better going and paying Juju and banking on his availability versus gambling and paying Will Fuller
yeah. But see,
and
so
banking
you
on
got
that.
Will Fuller's availability versus Juju's Juju, I guess technically you could call it. Because like if I wanted a professional football player that I know is going to show up and come to work, and regardless of injury, like the dude's going to show up, he's going to put in the work, he's going to go, 100% into football, and he's got the skill set to where he can just break open a game anytime he touches the ball. I want Will Fuller. If I want a guy that, it's a, you know, Sunday night, I'm bored, um, I'm babysitting my little nephew or something like that, and he wants, to play Fortnite, then I could call Juju up and
You're
play
not, come
Fortnite,
on, you're not one of them guys for real.
with him, and he can
Oh
dance, he can
no.
TikTok on the logos, he can dance on the logo, he can do all his little fun stuff, and then go out
So are
there.
you one of those guys that whenever an NFL player tweets about something other than football, you're in their mentions like, hey, why aren't you in the gym? Hey, why aren't you studying film?
No,
Hey, why are you doing anything else with your life other than talk? Like, what do you mean?
no, I'm
Juju
just messing.
chooses to do something that Will
No,
doesn't in his
no,
spare time. You think
yeah,
that Juju don't go as hard in the studying film and all just because he decides to play Fortnite or decides to do this and that, and Will
no,
Fuller
I didn't
decides
mean to
to
offend you with
take like
Fortnite.
PED. It's not Fortnite. I hate that whole concept of back whenever I was on Twitter, I used to see like, players post something about some other than football and there'd be like 10 people in the comments. What are you doing on Twitter? Why aren't you in the gym? Why aren't you studying film? Why aren't you do like these guys are supposed to have a life outside of that, man? Like I've
No,
never
I
understood
get it. I'm
that.
just messing. I'm just messing.
Like,
Um,
and so I think
but it is look, the dancing and the TikTok shit is annoying because if you're gonna go out there and TikTok and then you're gonna put up 4 catches for 15 yards on
yeah, I
me,
mean,
then
some of that's dependent,
I
man.
mean,
But
come on.
on how well your quarterback plays and stuff too. It's not all out of his hands. The dude's having fun, man. I
Yeah,
don't care.
no, but
I
look,
think it's
look.
though. I think it's like
Hey,
the bat
hey,
flip in baseball.
everybody
Like
shit on it. Everybody shit on Antonio Brown saying like, you know,
Antonio Brown was weird, bro. He wasn't having fun. That dude, he's some of like it.
no, I'm
But
not talking about that, but I'm talking about like whenever he was saying like, Juju ain't the Juju y'all saw without me because I'm taking all the coverage away from him. And since he's left, I
on
mean,
and the games
Ju-
Juju played, like getting back to my point, the games Juju played in the slot this year without Antonio Brown, Juju was just fine, man. Like if you're a
I
team
think
and you
he's a
can
good
put
player.
him where he needs to
I would rather
be,
have, I'd rather take the chance. I would rather have 13 games of Will Fuller than 16 games of Juju.
if you even get 13. But yeah, I mean, I get your point. But
Yeah.
like, you're just talking about mitigating risk over there with Carson Wentz and stuff. And now you're trying to like Juju's as dependable as they come and he's gonna be out there. Like if you put him in a slot where he needs to be, like he's not an outside receiver,
Yeah, but
but
see, are you gonna pay all that? Because the money he's gonna command is gonna be pretty significant. Are you paying that kind of money for a dude that's just gonna play in the slot that he
yeah,
can't?
if that's where I need, then yeah, he
No,
can be productive as possible
if
out
if
there.
I'm paying that kind of money for a dude, I need to be able to move them wherever the hell I need to move them. I can't just stick a guy in the Z slot and that's it. That's all. That's it.
I mean, he didn't line up 100% of snaps in the in the
No,
slot,
but
but I get what you're saying. But
yeah, I
still,
mean,
I mean, I I think Will Fuller. If you can guarantee me 16 games of each, then yeah, I would take Will Fuller over Juju. But if I need a slot receiver, then yeah, Juju's number 4 for me over Will Fuller.
all
But
right. Well, let's move.
um,
Let's move on. We had a little fun with that one. So then, we've got then kind of that next tier of the older guys that are kind of falling
mhm,
off. Um,
these guys
Marvin,
start ring chasing right here.
yeah, Marvin Jones, AJ Green, my boy Ty. Fingers crossed. Uh, Larry Fitzgerald, of course. I wouldn't be surprised me the least if Larry retires.
Yeah, I hope not, but yeah, it makes
Yeah,
sense. And the one name that's not on this list that should be, I think he is in the top 10, is Antonio Brown too.
yeah, yeah. AB. I mean, even though
He's
he's a free
definitely
agent,
he's a top 10 free agent, like on
yeah,
this list.
I think I don't see him technically being a free agent though. Like I think he's just gonna play wherever Brady plays, and if Brady's team doesn't want him, then he's just not gonna play football.
Yeah, and I
Uh,
mean they've already said that they want Antonio back. It seems like he, has kind of a loyalty to Tom with everything he's reportedly tried to do to get AB back and things like that, regardless of where he was at. So I I hate to say it because I want to see Chris Godwin have that workload he had a couple years ago as far as targets and stuff. Um, but I think they're both back with the
yeah,
Bucks,
I
honestly.
I
I think
agree.
Godwin on a long-term deal and Antonio on a short-term deal. I think they're both back. And Tampa tries to run this thing back, but I didn't want him to go unmentioned because I mean he would be right there, like with what he showed this year. Whenever he did come and play, he's above that. He's above Marvin Jones, AJ Green, T.Y. Hilton, Sammy Watkins, Fitz for me. Like I definitely want AB over all those guys. So I
Oh
felt like he
yeah,
needed to be mentioned, whenever talking about this.
yeah.
But I
He's one of the
think
greatest
it's
receivers in NFL history. He's just
yeah,
a head case.
yeah.
I mean, but talent wise, you can't deny. So then, of course, AJ Green. I think he's gone. I don't see him coming back. Plus, I think they're not gonna
Wait,
like.
like retired?
No, no, I think he's gone from Cincinnati.
Okay, okay, okay. Yeah, yeah, I
Yeah, I
agree.
don't
I
think AJ
agree.
Green's retiring, but
Okay.
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, the guy's just
I
he
don't think he's
he's
gonna
gonna stay on the
retire,
field either.
but I
But I think he's gonna be one of those guys that might sign in, you know, Buffalo or Green Bay. I could see him, a Green Bay guy, or
yeah.
you know, who who knows? With these older guys, they're gonna start ring chasing and
I mean,
like
there's been kind of a rumor with Marvin Jones that
with the Rams.
whenever Stafford signed, apparently Marvin Jones the report was Marvin Jones and multiple other players, but Marvin Jones is the only one that's been put a name on the report so far that they text Stafford like, "Hey, we want to come play with you in LA," So I mean, Marvin Jones is from LA. He's played with Stafford, so I could see that happening. I think it would
Definitely.
be a good addition for the team.
Yeah, and that's one of y'all's biggest needs is you need a guy that can take the top off of defense. And I mean,
Yeah,
even
he's not the deep threat
yeah,
he
yeah,
was,
I was gonna say even in his
several
advanced
years
age, I
ago.
still think
But
he can be productive in that role.
yeah,
Um,
right, exactly.
but but yeah,
But yeah,
I'm a huge Marvin Jones fan. I think he's one of the most underrated receivers of the last 10 years. So then we have Ty.
I think if he doesn't go back to the Colts, it's got to be to ring chase. Like if it, yeah, like
Oh yeah, yeah,
Hilton
I
obviously
agree.
isn't as decorated as a Colt as Larry Fitz is a Cardinal, but
Yeah,
it's kind of both of those guys. Like if you're not going to go back to the team you've been with your entire career, is Larry Fitz especially. But like if you're not going to go back, you got to be ring chasing at that point.
yeah. Well,
You
see,
know,
I don't necessarily think he would ring chase. Like he's like man, I love T.Y. Hilton. Like I do, and I want him back in a Colts uniform. I think he's gonna go straight up money. Like I think he's gonna take the biggest, fattest deal he can find out there, secure
make
the
the last big
bag.
chunk of money.
Yeah, just secure the bag, and
But I mean, do you think that he's going to really get like big money offers though? With how
I
he
think he would
like
surprise you. I think he'll surprise you. What?
he did have a few good, like several good games in a row to end the season. But
Yeah, and I think it's just
I don't
a lot of
know.
that too is like Rivers and obviously you have a new quarterback. He's had a new quarterback. The last like 3 years.
Yeah,
You know what
and
it
just with
was?
how deep the wide receiver class is for free agency this year, it would be surprising to see him
Yeah.
pull
Well,
in a
I'm
big
hoping,
bag. But who
his
knows
breaks
though?
down a little bit, and he just returns, and because I still think Ty is very productive, and I don't want to see him in another uniform. I mean, that's like the equivalent of seeing Reggie Wayne in that New England uniform for
Yeah.
the training camp that he was in, and then he was there for like 2 weeks of training camp, and then was like, nope, hell no.
But
Uh,
we haven't even touched on like predictions or anything for these guys either. So like where we think, we talked about the top guys and how we'd slot them in terms of where they should be this year with Allen. Let's just be clear. Chris Godwin, we talked about Allen Robinson and Chris Godwin in the same tier, and I think that they are.
really,
But
I don't like, and
Allen
really, like, in
Robinson's
all
number
honesty, I
one
don't
on
think they're
that,
in the
right?
same tier. I don't think they're in the same tier. I think Allen Robinson is clearing away the number one guy. I think he's in a class of his own, and then it drops, and then you've got Chris Godwin and Kenny Galladay. I think those guys are closer than Chris Godwin and Allen Robinson are to each other.
Okay, I'm a huge Allen Robinson fan, but I'm also a huge Chris Godwin fan, so I disagree. I do think that Allen Robinson is the clear number one. Like as much as I love Chris Godwin, I wouldn't make an argument for him being better than Allen Robinson. I think Allen Robinson is the best receiver in this class, but I think there's a bigger gap between Chris Godwin and Kenny Galladay than there is between Allen Robinson and Chris Godwin.
Yeah.
But I still agree with you that I think that Allen Robinson is the number one unquestioned receiver in his class. I mean, he's had 64% of his career targets have been deemed catchable.
Untouchable. Yep.
64. That's 94th out of 102 eligible players. And he's still putting up all Pro Bowl type numbers
Yeah,
with
yeah.
that.
That's why I think
So
I think
if
Allen
Allen
Robinson, like, in
Robinson
all honesty,
goes
I think
to,
Allen Robinson's a top 5 wide receiver in the league.
yeah, I know, I agree. And I don't think Chris Godwin is far behind him. Like, I think he's probably in the top 10.
I don't
Um,
think he's top 10.
uh, I'd be willing to debate that, but that'll take too long tonight. Um, but
I
Allen
don't think
Robinson,
Chris
yeah,
Godwin is the best receiver on his own team, much less top 10 in the league.
I think that's another fun debate too. But again, one that would take too much time for right now. But
He might,
um,
and if AB gets his head right, Chris Godwin might be the third best wide receiver on his team.
maybe. But again,
But that just shows you how deep Tampa's wide receiver core is.
yeah. I mean, you're talking
That's
about
not a
like
knock on Chris
he
Godwin at
might not
all.
be the third best, but they might have three in the top 15 too. So like, but anyway, but yeah, Allen Robinson, 94th out of 102 players, during that stretch where 64% of his targets have been deemed catchable. So if he does put himself in a situation where he has a competent quarterback that can get him the
Green Bay.
ball, yeah, like something like that, that would make a lot of sense. He'll solidify himself as a top 5 receiver in the league to me, no doubt too. But
Yeah.
Chris Godwin, like even Chris Godwin this year, whenever his numbers were lower, Brady had a passer rating of 131.9 whenever he targeted Godwin this year. And he had a little case of the drop skis at the end of the year for whatever reason, extremely weird. But I mean, prior to that, he had only had 4 drop passes in his first 3 years in the league. So I don't think that's the new norm. I think that'll be the outlier. So I still think Chris Godwin is one of the best receivers in the league. Great hands overall, great route runner. Like it's tough to find holes in his game either. Like I said, I think Allen Robinson's better, but I think these are two really, really good receivers that are about to hit the market. So I think A-Rob to Green Bay makes a lot of sense if they want to make the move, but I also wouldn't be surprised if they ended up signing like Marvin Jones or T.Y. Hilton, or like somebody in that section of guys. It wouldn't be surprising to see that either. I do think Godwin's back in Green Bay though, in Tampa Bay though. And like we already said earlier, I think Godwin goes back long term and Antonio goes back short term, both to Tampa, and then Juju. I think it's the New York Jets for me. Honestly, I think they're a team that's going to throw some money at him from what that I've read,
I can definitely see that.
and with
Well,
him having that social media presence too, and taking his talents to New York, I think that's enticing for him as well. So,
speaking of New York, I saw a report today that they're actually looking at cutting Jamison Crowder as a cap casualty. So he could definitely fill in that role. I think that is so disrespectful to Jamison Crowder. I think
he plays so well this
so
year.
underrated, man. He's
Yeah.
such a great receiver. And see, in a year where all these guys, and which is another reason I think Chris Ballard is just going to keep those pieces that he can throw on the dart. there's going to be so many guys with the cap being lowered and all these teams that are in cap casualty, situations where they're going to have to cut some really, really, really productive players. And you have teams, like the Colts or the Jets, or, even if the Jets do cut him, I mean, Jacksonville, that have all this money, and they're going to get some really productive players for some really good prices in free agency this year. So let's see here. Let's kind of move on to the next position. Let's see what we got.
Running backs. Yeah.
Well, here we go. So obviously with running backs, you know what team I'm on. Hashtag never pay running back.
Yeah, that is a podcast wide recommendation. Yeah, I'm on board with that 100%.
You never pay money for running backs. You just draft one. And I mean, if you get like a Jonathan Taylor, Cam Akers type, you can draft one in the second round. That's the earliest I would ever recommend drafting one. The ideal situation is James Robinson, where he's just an undrafted free agent, and then boom, like that's just proof that you don't need to pay running backs.
Anything past the first round pick, though, if it looks like an elite prospect and you get him in the second or beyond, like, you pull the trigger, it's worth it at that point. But
yeah,
you play out your 4 years and you move on, and you do it again.
And this isn't a knock on the player, but I'm just saying, like, Kansas City this year, running back in the first round. I mean, obviously, they got to the Super Bowl, but the more productive back, which, I mean, he played one in the Super Bowl, but for the majority of the playoffs, the more productive back is Damian Williams.
Darrell Williams, yeah.
Darrell Williams, my bad. I always get those two confused. So, I mean, it's just, would they have been better off with maybe another weapon or another defensive piece there over a running back? Who's to say?
Maybe a backup offensive lineman to fill in.
Maybe you draft a tackle. But let's see here. So obviously the clear number one guy here, is
this is a lot like quarterback to me. There's a clear number one, then everything else is like, yeah.
Well, to an extent, my feelings on one of the guys.
You're going to talk about Chris Carson. Yeah, I know.
But Aaron Jones is clearly the number one guy. I don't necessarily think Green Bay brings him back. I don't think they do, because I think he's just going to, Jerry Jones is going to line up with a Brinks truck and say, like, "Oh, you're a running back? Let me give you $100 million."
He probably won't this time around, but I mean, there are teams like the Jets, the Dolphins, places like that have a need at the position and have money to spend, to where, like, with Green Bay already having money tied up and Green Bay spending a second round pick on AJ Dillon, it's easy to see a path where he gets a lot more money from somewhere else than Green Bay. And running back's a position where, as bad as you might win or in a ring, it's tough to pass up that type of bag from another team that might not be as good as the team you're on, because, like, unlike quarterbacks, you're not going to get another contract like this once this contract's up. Like, this is your big money contract that you're signing.
Yeah, or maybe if you're Green Bay, you let Aaron Jones go for $12 million a year or $15 million a year, and you're sitting there with your first round pick, and you're like, oh, we're sitting here at late 20s and Travis Etienne's on the board.
They've already drafted a running back in the second round. Don't think they won't do it in the first.
Yeah,
they drafted a backup quarterback.
I think you should 100% go defense or wide receiver.
Look, they drafted a backup quarterback in the first whenever they had Aaron Rodgers on the roster for multiple years. So anything is possible in my Kevin Garnett voice whenever it comes to these guys and the draft. So who knows, man?
But then after that, I think the next, this one says Kenyon Drake. He's not the second best running back in this class. I don't care what anybody says. It's Chris Carson.
I know, right? Philip Lindsay is, yeah.
Chris Carson. Look, I know you hate Chris Carson.
I don't hate him.
That's fine. It is what it is.
You talk about the risk of paying running backs. You really gonna pay Chris Carson?
I would not pay Chris Carson. I wouldn't pay Aaron Jones. I would find a guy in the fifth round.
Just making sure. Aaron Jones is
Chris
the only
Carson.
One that.
What round was Chris Carson picked in? Was he was a late round guy too, wasn't he? Fifth?
I know Philip Lindsay was too. Leonard Fournette certainly wasn't.
Philip Lindsay was an undrafted free agent.
Yeah, Leonard Fournette certainly wasn't. Todd Gurley certainly wasn't. A couple other guys that are listed on there, I think.
Chris Carson was a 7th-round pick
Yeah,
249.
he definitely returned value on that for sure. Even as much as I'm not as huge of a fan as most people, he definitely returned value on
All
that
the
pick,
dude does is produce.
and
All the
that's why you don't pay running back.
yeah,
Like you were alluding to. But I think most of these guys are in timeshares or back. Like the only one that I think we're talking about that has a chance to land a lead back role somewhere is Aaron Jones. Basically, is how this boils down to. Everybody else, they're going to be in timeshares for me. I don't
yeah,
see anybody else being a
yeah.
lead
We'll
back.
move
So
on. And obviously when these guys get signed, because we're just talking, real life prospects right now. When these guys get signed, we all know how important running back is, when it
in
comes to
fantasy,
fantasy. So we'll
hmm
definitely hit on these.
yeah,
So
I think the fantasy show is going to be more fun than just the regular show. To be
yes,
honest, man.
definitely. So now we'll get into my favorite position in this free agency is the tight end class. I really like this tight end class because there's so many versatile guys here. Depending on what you need. You need blocking. Obviously, we know Gronk's not going to go anywhere. He's on the list, but he's not leaving.
Yeah, it's Tampa or
Um,
retire for him. Like
yeah,
let's be real.
but I mean, you need blocking. Hunter Henry's there. You have one of the best blocking tight ends in football, Alley Cox. I
Big
think he's
Mo.
back. Yeah, I think Mo's back. Um, I love that guy. Love that guy. I liked him whenever he was a basketball player. For Shaka Smart, I was a big fan of him in college basketball, and I never in my wildest dreams envisioned him actually being a productive tight end. But he was one of the best tight ends in football. I just think there's so many mouths to feed with the tight end position in Indy that he didn't really get. I mean, obviously when Doyle got hurt and Trey Lance was still out, he got his chance to sign, and you saw what happened. But then those guys come back and it eats into his workload. But he's unbelievable blocker. You need a guy that can break a game open, with a touch at the tight end position. Jonnu Smith's on here. Super fast guy, great receiver. You need an athletic freak of nature. Gerald Everett's available. Guy's just an athletic freak. And then, you need a guy that you can pay a lot of money. You can set on IR, in week 3. Hunter Henry, top of the list right there.
Hey, he had a nice healthy year
Yeah,
this past year
I'm
though,
just
man.
joking
He
because
picked a
The
really
Colts have
good
been leaking
time.
Hunter Henry, and I'm a huge Hunter Henry fan. Personally, I love the guy's game. I love everything he does at the position. He's a really good blocker, very extremely reliable pass catcher. Um, he reminds me a lot of like a prime Jason Witten type of a guy. And I think those are guys that you can win with. Now, obviously, I'm not going to give him a huge deal because the injury history, but I definitely really like Hunter Henry at the top of this list. And then right
Yeah,
underneath that, I
I
think,
don't think there's any debate on number one.
yeah, but I really like Jonnu Smith as a playmaker at that position. I think he's just a fantastic playmaker, and I'm really really excited to see him not return to Tennessee. So somebody go out, give Jonnu. I mean, dude, if he wants to come, replace Trey Burton, play that role. Doyle's getting a little older. Maybe you come to Indy. We'll see.
John or Hunter Henry, the one, or really Gerald Everett, but Johnu and Hunter Henry for
Yeah, and
sure.
I would actually kind of like to see Gerald. I know you're a lot more versed in Gerald Everett, but I have him in Dynasty, so I watch a lot of Gerald Everett myself. And
He had a big case of the drops and stuff
yeah,
this year, man, which could end up being an outlier, but he's supposed to be like a freak receiving tight end, and he wasn't very good catching the ball this year, which the years prior with the small, he got a much smaller sample size the years prior, but it wasn't as bad of a problem then. But I mean, if he can fix that up, as far as just like the freak athlete tight ends that teams are looking for, he's not, as far just from an athlete standpoint, he's number one on this list to me, but he's not the
yeah,
best tight end. But like, just like
definitely.
you're talking about freak athlete, man, like, he's at the top of the list for that. But there's a little bit more risk in there with him. But if he can get those wrongs righted, he could be a lot of fun. But yeah, I think Hunter Henry and Jonnu are 1 and 2, and
All
then
right.
so I
Well,
think tight end's pretty easy to talk about.
yeah. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next position here. Let's see what we got here. I mean, there's
Everybody's favorite position, the offensive line.
yeah. We're not going to go too much into every position. Obviously, offensive linemen.
I think
There.
there's four really big names right there at the top, and then after that, it's just kind of like there's good players, but like
Yeah.
Brandon Sheriff and Joe Thuney and Trent Williams, and then Corey Linsley. Those guys are names that like I'd be shocked if any of them
I think,
change scene. Like
yeah. Trent
I don't
Williams,
know.
I can kind of see him chasing money, but
Yeah, I mean Joe Thuney, he got franchise tag last year by New England, so like he
yeah.
probably is gone. But like those are the guys we're like,
I think Scherf is going to get a pretty big deal there. But
yeah, I agree.
I don't see Lindsley leaving either. Alex Mack, very productive center, one of the best centers
Hmm.
of the last decade for sure.
Yeah, he's getting up there, but I mean, if
Yeah,
he's healthy, he could be really productive for a team on a short team deal,
yeah,
short term deal.
yeah. Like maybe I can probably possibly see him replacing, you know, oh Pittsburgh. I don't know why I'm blanking right now.
Oh, Pouncey.
Yeah, Pouncey. I can see him in Pittsburgh. On
Yeah,
a
that would
short.
make sense.
So, so let's go ahead to this next one. Let's see what we got
Now we
here.
get on the defensive side of the
Yeah,
ball. This is just
and
like the best
look,
defensive overall, like
yeah,
regardless of
and
position.
look, if you need, so there's two positions in this draft or in this free agent class that if you need, a player at these two positions, it's a great year to have some money. And that is the wide receiver position, and that is the pass rusher position. That
Everybody always needs more pass rush.
Yeah,
You can never
yeah,
get
we
enough.
we saw what happened in the Super Bowl. Um, so you got Von Miller, which I don't necessarily see him leaving, but I mean, there's some controversy going on with him as well.
Yeah, it don't doesn't Denver have like a team option or something? I don't know when
Yeah,
they have to exercise that by, but so he might not go anywhere based off of that. But I mean, with all the crazy stuff going on with the cap and stuff, who knows, man?
yeah, we'll see. Leonard Williams, I think very very talented guy. He definitely showed out this year. Melvin Ingram for the Chargers. He's another guy that's getting on up there. He might want to go to a competing team.
Yeah, definitely. I think
Matt
so.
Judon for the Ravens. I don't see any way the Ravens can bring him back because he wants the bag, and they're already in some pretty serious cap situation there. But Dupree's another one we can kind of see what happens with him. I don't think he returns to Pittsburgh. He's kind of underachieved. He's had
Man, it sucks though because he was
good-
having a really good year last year before he got hurt.
yeah.
Like
So
I think he had like 8 sacks in like 11 or 13 games, something like that. Like
yeah,
he was going on to have a really great year right before he hit the open market, and then that injury happened. So that was kind of unfortunate.
yeah. Then you got Shaq Barrett. Don't think he's leaving Tampa.
No,
He's
I
gonna
don't know. I think he's going to get the bag, but
he's gonna get paid or he's gonna get tagged. Either way, I don't see him going.
yeah,
Then you got Jadeveon Clowney. Everybody. I remember reading the group messages. Like, oh shit, like, well, Clowney, we gonna wreck y'all, blah blah blah. And
man, he
yeah,
talk about underperforming.
yeah. Wonder who could have seen that coming. Anyway, uh, guy gets great pressure. I mean, he's a great pressure guy. He doesn't finish. He can't get sack numbers.
Yeah,
Plus,
I don't think he had a single sack last year, did he? In the games he did play?
yeah, he didn't. Zero.
That's
Uh,
man.
Big old price tag. So, I mean, anytime you can pay a running back and you can pay guys that get hurt constantly, come on, Tennessee.
I do think Justin Simmons is interesting
Justin
though.
Simmons is fantastic.
I would be shocked if Denver let him get away, but I mean,
I don't see it happening at all.
then 11 and 12 on this list with Patrick Peterson and AJ Bouye. I mean, those are big names, but I think those are guys that are both kind of
Tail end.
I think they could still be productive, but they're not the names
Peterson's
that you
really
recognize.
fallen off like this last, like he's been
Yeah, he had a really bad year last
2 or
year.
3 years now. Actually, he's gotten worse and worse every year. But this year it was really bad. But we'll see if he can turn it around. Obviously we touched on JJ Watt and then Yannick Ngakoue. He didn't really perform to what Baltimore thought he would. I don't necessarily know if he'll be back. I think he's another one of these guys that could possibly, chase that money.
Yeah, I think that'll be the case for sure.
And I think he's a lot better fit in a 4-3 than Baltimore's 3-4. I think he's definitely a 4-3 guy. I wanted us to draft him like, a couple years back, it was more than a couple, but I was a big fan of him coming out. And obviously we didn't get him. So I would love to see that wrong righted. I'd love to see him in a Colts uniform. I'm a big fan of Yannick Ngakoue. Plus, it'd give him a chance to kind of shit on the Jaguars for a few years. AJ Bouye is another guy. He didn't really perform great after he left Jacksonville, but he wasn't bad either. And he's another one of these cap casualty guys that just, you know,
Yeah, definitely.
so I can kind of see him taking, just a 1 year flyer, kind of similar to the Xavier Rhodes deal, who's also a free agent, by the way, Xavier Rhodes. You know, so we'll see if the Colts will bring him back. I don't think we do. I think we want to, but from everything that I've read, he is going just. I mean, this is more than likely his last contract, and you can't fault these guys, especially tail end of their career. Might be the last time they have an opportunity to get really good money.
Right.
Um, and so, from what I read today, the Colts were offering $9 million a year, and he thought that was lower than what he wanted, so they don't see him coming back. Um, I don't. I feel you, Chris Ballard. I'm not comfortable paying Xavier Rhodes more than $9 million a year.
No.
I would much rather have the same thing, and it's the same thing that's kind of happened with AJ Bouye. I'd much rather see AJ Bouye, come in on a 1 year deal, $5 million. See if you can turn your career around, because we've done it with three guys now. I heard it when Rashad Melvin, he played great for us, had a little 1 year deal, signed this big deal up in New York with the Jets. He fell off. Then we signed Pierre Desir, played really great for us. He got traded, and everybody's like, "Oh, what's going to happen? Pierre Desir was so good." He kind of fell off. So then we signed Xavier Rhodes. He had a really good year. I mean, I hope he doesn't fall off. I'm a really big Xavier Rhodes fan. I really like the guy. But we'll see what happens. But Indy's kind of been known for getting these reclamation projects at the cornerback position, and having them turn into some really good years. So I'd like to see AJ Bouye, and especially if you can maybe get Ngakoue and Bouye come back to the AFC South, shit on Jacksonville for a year or so. Nice little reunion. Both those guys were
Uh,
former guys with Jalen Ramsey back in the heyday, the one season heyday of Jacksonville Jaguars.
Losing to Tom Brady in the playoffs, if that sounds familiar to anybody else.
Mm.
But Richard Sherman's another name, kind of with Bouye and Patrick Peterson too. That's in the same kind of portion of his career as well. Is another. He's not on this list, but it's another guy that I
Yeah.
think deserves being mentioned, and another guy that I couldn't believe. And maybe I'm biased, but a guy that I couldn't believe wasn't listed as one of the top 10 guys, especially over some of these back end corners we're talking about. John Johnson with the Rams. Again, I said, I might be biased here, but I mean, he's been
Really not.
he's been one of the best safeties both in the run and in coverage for the last 2 years now, and he's extremely young still. He's hitting free agency in his prime, just for the simple fact that the Rams can't afford to pay him. Like, he deserves to be paid. I wanted to see him back with the Rams, but he deserves to go get the bag, as he should, with how well he's played since he was drafted as, I think he was a 3rd-round draft pick, I believe, by McVay and all them. And he's going to be a guy that his presence is really going to be felt. He's going to be missed whenever he does sign elsewhere to go chase the money. I think, honestly, there's a good shot he follows our old D coordinator out to the Chargers and forms the best safety combo in the league with Derwin James.
Oh, Derwin
Easily
James
the
gets help.
best. Yeah, dude, I do too. It's not fair for him, and not fair for football fans not to get to watch him play football. Um, but if I think there's a decent chance that happens, and if that does, they definitely have the best safety combo in the league. If assuming Derwin is healthy. But yeah, I was kind of shocked to see his name on the list, not on the list, and Richard Sherman's not on the list too. So I wanted to make sure to get those guys in there before
Yeah, there was a
we.
report that came out today about some teams that had kind of looked into Richard Sherman. Let me see if I can pull that up real quick
I saw
here.
something about the Jets, I think, if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah,
that they were expected to make a push, which makes sense with the 49ers
here we
DC
go.
going
Here we
to
go. Here.
the Jets as their head coach. So
Yeah. Richard Sherman. So apparently the Browns are out. They're not going to pursue him. Why this is so hard to find. It's always whenever you need something, you can't seem to find it.
Well, and one other thing while you're looking for that, one thing that I can pretty much guarantee you is one of these pass rushers is going to sign a 1-year deal to play with the Rams next year. It's just it's gonna happen, man.
They
I'm
want a
telling you.
career year.
Yeah, and they're going to have a career season playing next to Aaron Donald, and they're going to, after that 1-year deal, they're going to go make all sorts of money, which is just one of many reasons why I think JJ Watt should just come on down and wreak havoc, because he would, do incredible things. But I don't think JJ Watt's coming. But it wouldn't be surprised to see, like, if Bud Dupree doesn't get what he thinks he should be getting on the open market because of his injury, or Melvin Ingram, being toward the back end of his career, or something like that. It wouldn't be shocked to see that happen. I mean, you had Dante Fowler get traded to the Rams because he was being unproductive with the Jags, and he went on to have a great year next to Aaron Donald, signed this big 3-year deal with Atlanta and did absolutely nothing. And then you had Leonard Floyd, who had completely underperformed prior to last season with Chicago, comes in, plays next to Aaron Donald, has the best season of his career. Now he's projected. That's another free agent the Rams are likely going to lose, which is going to open up another hole for a pass rusher. And one of these guys is going to fill that hole for a 1-year deal and have another career year getting to play next to Aaron Donald. So looking forward to see which one of these guys lands. It's going to be that, or they'll draft somebody with, their second round pick. But yeah, I think one of these guys is going to end up just kind of naturally landing there as well. But we'll see.
Shaq Barrett. We'll see maybe what happens with that.
That one I haven't even considered a possibility, just because I'm so convinced he goes to Tampa. But I would piss myself if he did take a short, but he's already come out and said, it's my time to get the bag.
Yeah.
And I think Tampa gives it to him too, because it's worth it.
Yeah, definitely. So that'll kind of do our little quick free agent preview. I know it wasn't that quick, but
that quick, like, hour-long free agent preview.
It was quick for us because we can go for a lot longer.
Right, that's true. That's true.
Here. Told you guys we would go over a little bit of basketball real quick. We didn't want to leave you guys that are big into basketball, stranded out there on an island. Kind of like how my fantasy basketball team left Andrew's team stranded on an island this last week. Sorry, I had to do that.
Okay, you're going to take the shots at the guy that's got CJ and KD and other guys that have been sidelined for the entire week. Look, they might not have made up the 500 points or whatever I lost by this week, but I'm just saying, you can't don't take shots at me while I'm down, man. I'm struggling right now with these injuries. Leave me alone.
Like, you're the only one that has injuries. You're not the only.
I know I'm not the only one, and
Andre Drummond's been sitting out.
He just started sitting out.
I got DeAndre Hunter. He's been out for like 3 weeks.
And nobody, the one person maybe that didn't turn this off as soon as we stopped talking about football, definitely doesn't care about our fantasy basketball league, unless they just so happen to be in it. That might be a possibility.
I care about it. I'm undefeated.
I'm a little salty, man, because I had won it 3 years in a row, and then I finished second place last year, and now my team is really struggling this year. So
it's still early. There's still time.
I'm a little upset. It's every time one of my key guys gets healthy, another one gets injured. So I'm a little mad at fantasy basketball right now.
Yeah, I didn't even check mine tonight. I know, I had a couple guys, like Eric Gordon ended up setting. I know Andre Drummond ended up setting. So
he definitely is, and it's going to be some interesting stuff that happens with him and with Blake Griffin. Now that we're talking about NBA, I mean, that's kind of been the most recent news, is both the Pistons and Blake Griffin have decided to set him until a trade or buyout happens. And then the Cavs and Andre Drummond decided that they're going to set out games until a trade or buyout happens with that one as well. So, I mean, that could Andre Drummond and Blake Griffin aren't, the best players in the league by any stretch of the imagination, but if they go to one of these top teams and now they're the East or the West, it could kind of, shift things in one direction or the other, depending on where they land. So that'll be interesting to see, how that goes. But looking at when we got the East on the screen right now, Philly with a 2-game lead over the Bucks, 2.5-game lead over the Nets, in what I think is clearly the three best teams in the
Yeah.
East as far as that goes. And I think that there's a break there once you get past those guys, where the Pacers and the Celtics, and
Pacers have really like been struggling lately.
mhm,
It's been rough.
yeah,
Um,
3-7 out of their last 10 according to that page there. So yeah, but so I mean, I think whenever the playoffs gets here, the Pacers do have good pieces. The Celtics are a good team. If the Raptors do get Drummond, I don't think that moves them into contention or anything, but that probably moves them from the 8 seed to like the 6 seed or something like that. But it's still not like, I think the three teams we're going to spend the rest of the year talking about are the Sixers, the Bucks, and the Nets.
yeah, yeah, definitely. I think it's a 3-team division, and it's kind of the same thing over there with the West as well.
That's
Where
what I
you
too.
just got you know the top teams, and then it's just kind of whatever. I mean, obviously, you got teams like Phoenix and Portland and Denver, and teams like that are decent, and
Well, I mean, like it has been for several years now,
yeah,
the West is just deeper than the East. Like if the Nets are 16 and 12 right now, and they're the 3 seed in the East. And if you go over to the West, if they were in the West, they would, they'd be slotting down in like the
seven.
yeah, like the 7 seed. So I think, but I don't think that I don't think that there's 6 teams in the West that are better than like that I would pick over the Nets to win the title right now. But it's just credit to how deep the West is again, and how it seems to be on a year-to-year basis at this point now. And I mean the Jazz are even better than they were last year. The Suns are much improved, and Golden State, they're still a playoff team even without Klay Thompson, and with losing Kevin Durant and not having him. So the
Yeah,
West is deeper,
Steph,
but
Steph,
I do
Steph
still
Curry
think,
has been like on another like
oh my God, he's been playing so good. Um, but I mean, like whenever you really get down to it, though, as well as Phoenix is playing, I think it's tough to see a world where they beat the Lakers or the Clippers in a 7-game series. And I think the only team really where you can see a world where that would be to happen is the team that's at first right now, which is Utah, which I don't think is the best team in the Western Conference, just my opinion. I still think the Lakers are the best team. But I think similar to the East with the West, you've got 3 teams you can really focus on that you think are probably have a chance of coming out of the West, with other teams that are it's tough to see them winning a 7-game series against any one of these top 3 teams. So, I mean, do you disagree?
no, no, yeah, I agree completely. That's just the nature of the NBA is, all these stars, they want to team up, they want to play together, they want that easy path. And
And I mean, before the Nets acquired Harden, it had kind of dissolved into like duos. It was like
yeah,
the dynamic duos, and then the rest of the rosters.
yeah, and then these guys just want to team up, and it makes for an extremely top heavy league. I mean, every now and then, you get a team like Utah, that can kind of play the 2004 Pistons, type where they just have so many great role players, and they have, the
Yeah, I
one or
think
two.
Denver was the 2 seed last year. I believe, I don't remember exactly, but I think they were like the 2 seed last year, and it was kind of the same thing. Like they've got Jokic is incredible, and then Jamal Murray, and then they've got a bunch of good role players, but they don't have the LeBron, the Kawhi, that type of thing to kind of push them over the top.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, I think the discussion that needs to be had, just based off kind of what's been said a little bit in our sleeper chat, is do you think Utah can beat the Lakers or the Clippers in a 7-game series?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why they can't. I mean, I think anything's possible. Do I think it's likely in a 7-game series? Well, I mean, obviously it depends,
I guess basically I'm
especially
asking you, do you believe that they're the best team in the West? Like they're first in the West right now, but do you think that they're the best team in the West?
uh
Because I already said I don't. I still think the Lakers are the best team in the West.
it's still so early that it's hard to
It
tell.
is very early. We'll, we'll,
So
we'll be talking about
I
this a
think with the
lot more.
way I think with the way they've been playing to start the season, I think they are the best team in the West. But I think as the season goes on, and these guys, they lose their legs, and that defense intensity kind of falls off. the grind kind of just takes its toll over, the course of 82 games. Because what is it now? There's what, 50 something games left to play. That's
Yeah, there's still a lot of time to go.
it's all
Yeah.
basketball, and it takes its toll. I I don't know if they will be. Obviously they get helped with that Anthony Davis injury. We'll see if the Lakers, they might slot back a few more slots. But the Clippers have been extremely impressive. The Suns I've been extremely impressed with.
Definitely.
Portland's played really well.
Damian Lillard's back on his tear again. Even without CJ McCollum, he just continues to make every big shot that needs to be made. And just like, not the greatest defender in the world by any means, but man, he is so much fun to watch on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
It's just one of
Then I
the
think
best league guards in the league.
Yeah, after those teams, the Spurs, I think they're a really good defensive team. I don't necessarily know if they can score, the same as those other guys can. But we'll see. It's going to be an interesting season the way it plays out for sure. I think though, if I had to choose right now, I would probably choose the Clippers, honestly, because with the Davis injury and, he's going to be reevaluated here in a couple weeks, and there's a lot of basketball to play. They could fall out, very easily. You lose 5-6 games in the West. You're going from the 2 seed to the 7 seed. It's it's just like it is. That's like the year the Lakers missed the playoffs, and I got to hear all the, well, before LeBron got hurt, they were the number 2 seed in the West, and then he got hurt and they missed the playoff. It's like, dude.
Well, look,
They
I
were the
do
2
think they'll
seed with a
lose.
2-game lead in front of the 9 seed. Like, they were literally 2 games above being in the 9th seed. That's just the way
I do think that they'll drop a little bit if AD's out, but I still think they're going to win plenty of games with the roster they have, and with LeBron playing the way that he is right now. Like we were talking about how well Steph Curry's playing. I don't know what that man is drinking and eating and stuff like that, but
a lot of wine and probably a lot of fish.
man, the way that he's it's unreal how deep into his career, how he keeps continuing to play at this level. Like he's if he's the MVP right now, it's him and Embiid, I think, but Embiid's starting to miss some games and stuff too. But like if you had to put in your vote today, there's no shot LeBron isn't the MVP of the league right now.
Yeah.
And it's just for him to be as deep as he is into his career and still playing like this, man, it's just unreal. It's incredible. So I can't not talk NBA and not talk about how well my favorite player of all time, Kevin Durant, has looked coming back from this injury, taking like 500 days away from basketball and coming out here and playing the most efficient, best basketball, basic damn near of his career. I say damn near because he had some really incredible seasons before this, but just the way that he's come back after taking 500 plus days off away from basketball and looking like he hasn't missed a beat, I can't not talk about basketball and not at least throw that in there and talk about how exciting that is for me just as a person, man, because of how much I enjoy watching him play the game, and to see that his game hasn't regressed or changed at all. It's just been, I was nervous. I was really scared with the injury. I didn't know what would it be like? Have I already watched the last of KD being his full self? And it's a good feeling knowing that I haven't, and that he's still playing his game.
I think what helps him is that, granted, he's another one of these guys that's just like a freak of nature, but at the same time, like his whole game's not based around him being like an athletic freak. Like,
yeah, he's light-footed.
Yeah, like worst case scenario, like the dude can still pull up over anybody like at any moment. So
best mid-range game in the league. Yeah, easy. Gosh, it's so fun to watch, so smooth. Yeah, I could talk. We could literally have a full 1-hour podcast about Kevin Durant, and I could talk about that all day. But it's good to see him back to his normal self.
Yeah, I don't get much into basketball anymore, man. Like it's not like it was. You know how I am, dude. I'm old.
I know. Yeah. You're one of them get off my lawn type of guys when it comes to basketball.
Look.
We're the exact opposite on that,
flop. I know you saw that flop the other day. I know you saw it on the internet. That shit was trash, bro. I just can't enjoy shit like that, man. Like it's too. It is what it is. Like I just can't get into it. Like obviously I watch it because the fantasy and gambling and all that shit. But I don't just sit down and be like, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna enjoy a basketball game. I just can't do it. Like I
Yeah,
start
we're
watching it.
complete opposites on that, man.
Yeah,
I think basketball is as fun as it's ever been to watch, is specifically NBA playoff basketball. Like if when
I think
turning
last
on
year's playoffs were good.
turning on a playoff game right now with the amount of talent that's in the league and the amount of like as deep as the league is in talent now, and once those guys hit playoff mode and it gets really competitive, there are some flops. It's not the same game that your pappy and your grandpappy watched. It's not the same game, but the level of skill and talent, and then the competition level once that goes up in the playoffs, there is no better basketball being played on the planet than NBA playoff basketball. Like, and March Madness might be more
Yeah,
exciting.
see, we disagree to an extent on that. It's never been as good as it's ever. I think the talent in I agree. The talent right now is probably better than it's ever been. I think when those guys get competitive and actually play, I I think it has the opportunity to be, but I don't think the game's as good as it's ever been because literally 90% of the games that I end up watching is a dude dribble down the court, shoot a three. He misses or makes it. If he misses, the guy gets the rebound, passes to the guard. He dribbles down the court. He shoots a three. He misses. The guy gets a rebound, passes it. He dribbles down the court. Maybe there's 2, 3 more passes in there. They shoot a three.
I mean, there's
Damn
a
it,
couple
I
teams that
can't.
are really ISO based in the
Yeah, like
league, but
if I
there's
wanted to
also a
watch shit
lot
like
of
that, dude,
teams.
I'd roll on down to the pack. I'd roll on down pack on a Friday night and just watch
I
some
think
dudes jack some shit up.
I think that point is over exaggerated just as much as the
I don't think it is. I mean, it's literally what I watch. Like it's what I see on the television. Like
then
just
there's no way
dudes
you've watched
jacking shit up.
there's no way you've watched the Utah Jazz play this year, even though they're one of the best teams in the league. There's no way you've watched, like, the tendencies are different. Like, they do shoot more threes now than they used to, but it's not all dribble, shoot, isolation basketball, every single team across the league. Like, there is still ball movement in the league. That some teams are more ISO based than others are, but there's still plenty of ball movement that goes
Yeah,
on in these
I mean,
games.
I've watched the Jazz. I think, and that's why I think the Jazz can win in a 7-game series against some of these teams. That's why I'm not super high on Brooklyn, to come out of the East or Milwaukee. That's why I don't trust Milwaukee. I don't.
But why Brooklyn hasn't been playing that ISO ball though?
Yeah, well,
So like the
I get that.
James Harden had got traded to Brooklyn and essentially just said, I'm going to play point guard for you guys, and has taken like half the shots he used to and averaging double digit assists since he came in the league. Like, and they're moving the ball, and these aren't just like he dribbles for 20 seconds and passes right before the shot clock and gets an assist for it. Like,
Well, he still
they're
does it.
they're moving and making plays, and it's, I mean, I don't.
But it's multiple guys though too. Like that style can possibly work whenever you got a guy like Kyrie that you can put in an ISO, and then you got a guy like KD you can put in an ISO, and then you got a guy like Harden who can create and do what he does from ISO, like that. They just take turns doing it. It's not like you're watching the 2015 Spurs out there moving the
You
ball.
can't have 16 assists based off of guys playing ISO a whole game. That's not possible. There's
Oh,
ball
yeah,
movement
that's
in there if one
100%
guy's having
possible.
16
Dude, have you not
assists.
watched James Harden
No.
like the last 5 years?
I just watched the game where he had like 16, 17
I
assists.
think
I
tonight
literally like a couple nights ago.
he had 14. He had a
Well,
triple double tonight.
and he
Kyrie,
had 16 a couple nights ago. Whenever they beat, who are they playing? Whenever I was sitting there watching that game, Golden State. Whenever they beat Golden State, he had like 16 assists. And it's not just standing
but
around,
there's
man.
no
These
yeah,
guys are.
but that goes into the point that like there's no defense being played anymore. There's just no defense. Like it's like right now, yeah,
Maybe
Harden's
not
got
as
big
much in
numbers.
the regular season, but in
Harden's
the
got big
postseason, these guys are
numbers.
playing defense. Like,
They're trying. I just
That's another thing. Man, like the whole like 3-pointers and no defense and stuff. That's just as overblown as Michael Jordan got punched in the face every single possession of his career, talking about how tough the defense was back then.
nobody
For
defense doesn't get punched in the face.
for every 10-minute clip of look at the defense MJ had to play, there's a 10-minute clip of look at the defense nobody played on MJ. Like you can find both sides of it, but for whatever, like people have held on to this idea that it was tougher back then. There's nobody's arguing that it wasn't tougher, but it's so exaggerated now. It's so blown out of proportion. And I just feel like a lot of it is just recency bias where people don't remember that like there wasn't every single possession dudes were getting knocked on their ass. Like
Well, no,
there
obviously
was
it's
there
not
was
every single
lax
possession. It's
there
not
was lax
football,
defense back then
but
too. Like there wasn't just lax defense now. And the reality is we've already said that there's the most talent that there's ever been in the league right now.
yeah,
So I
there's
mean,
more skill.
maybe do you think part of it is just the fact that these guys are just harder to guard than the entire league was as a whole was harder to guard back in the 90s and the 80s and things
To
like that?
an
Like
extent.
these guys are harder to play defense against than the guys that your pappy and your
Well,
grandpappy
yeah, but
watched. Like
it's harder to play defense when you can't put your hands on people.
the rules has
When
part
you
to
have
do
to
with
sit
it
there and
too.
watch them.
But I mean, like part of it has to do with just the fact that man,
I
these
mean, just
guys can play
look at the way
offense better
look
than
at the way scoring's exploded once they got rid of that hand check rule. If you can't touch a player and you have to sit there and watch him, it's you can. I mean,
yeah,
to
the
really
rules
play
is definitely a
defense is
part of it.
hard.
I don't
Like
disagree with
it,
that.
but
I just
that's not saying like that's another overblown argument. Is like, well, these guys would go back to your granddad's days and they would kill all the plumbers that played. It's like, dude, no, they ain't. Like that's not
not
happening.
every single guy, but
No,
the league
but
is
no,
the league as a
that's the
whole
thing.
definitely has more talent in it now than it did in the 70s and the 80s. Thing
Well,
like
yeah, I
from
think
top to
yeah, the
bottom,
70s and 80s, like
even the
basketball was on the
90s.
verge of death. I don't know if I agree with that. I think the
There's
90s.
100% more talent from top to bottom in the league right now than there was in the 90s. 100%.
I think there's more marquee names. But I think there's some guys back then that if they played today, they would be right up there with some of these other guys. Um, guys that people don't even really like think about. That would be like right now. Obviously you get rid of the coke problem, but like right now, you don't think Sean Kemp would absolutely decimate people right now? Like
Yeah,
Sean Kemp,
Sean
boy,
Kemp. Just as far as a talent, Sean Kemp was a top talent then. Like we're not. I'm not talking about like. I'm not talking about. I'm not here to tell you Charles Barkley couldn't succeed now. I'm
no,
talking about like
anybody
the
that says Charles
middle.
Barkley could not succeed in the NBA today should never talk
I'm
about
talking about like at the role playing level and things like that. Those guys in the league today are more talented and more physically gifted than the guys were in the 90s and the 80s and the 70s.
it.
Every era has had top players that could play at any point just because of how incredible basketball
I
players
know,
they
I get
are.
what you're
So
saying,
I'm
but
not talking about the top level guys whenever I'm talking about that. I'm just saying top to bottom, literally to the last player in the league, from LeBron to the very last guy in the league. There's more talent now and like just more skill involved in the game than there has ever been to me.
yeah, I don't think there's more skill. I think guys are possibly more athletically gifted, therefore making them harder to guard. But like whenever I look at skill, like I look at a guy like Luca or Larry, like yeah, like that dude is extremely skilled because he's not gonna blow it. Like he's not super fast. He's not gonna jump over you. He's just a very skilled basketball player. And there was a lot of Lucas back then that
No, there weren't
that
a lot of Lucas.
no, I'm saying like as far as like they're not fast. They're not you can't jump
Yeah,
over them. They're just very
yeah,
good at
but they
defense.
weren't as skilled as Luca though.
Well, no, no, I'm not saying they're as skilled, but I'm saying there's a lot of guys like that that
Yeah,
just get
but
overlooked.
just because they got some nice skills and they're like just because they're like a little underrated or whatever, they're still not Luca good. So I mean, if they weren't
Well,
Luca good back then, they're not
I'm
going to
not
be Luca
saying they're
good
him.
now.
I'm saying there's a lot of
You
guys
got to find a different.
that
You
are
got to find
very
a. You got to find like a different. Um,
way to describe it.
Yeah, yeah, because Luca, you can't describe Luca with those guys because those guys wouldn't be Luca. Like Luca is one of those guys that you talk about is in the one of the top players in the league right now. And there weren't like I said, I'm not discrediting the Luca level players of yesteryear. You know what I'm saying? And Luca's in that level right now. So like those type of players that are in that level now, I'm not discrediting the old ones either. Um,
Yeah, I would just enjoy
It's the
basketball
role
more. It
playing
just comes down to
guys.
this. I would enjoy basketball more if they got the hand checking rule back. That's the only thing I ask for. If you're able to put your hands on another dude and you don't get called a foul every time you touch somebody. And if, obviously, I mean, even players back then, like players flopped. I mean, obviously not to the degree that they do now. It's not even anywhere close. But I mean, it does
No,
happen. I mean, you can,
it didn't work as much back then, so it didn't make sense to do it. But now
yeah,
it's like
yeah. I mean, it's
it's whack to see
embarrassing.
it happen.
It's
But
embarrassing.
like you know that you know that they know that it works. So if they think they're going to gain another
Yeah.
possession out of it,
I just
guys are going to
I
do it.
hate I hate the plumber argument that I think that's just the dumbest. Like right now, nobody like here's a guy nobody even talks about. But I mean, like I know you know him. I know there's a few other guys, but like George Gervin, the Iceman, that dude was Kevin Durant before Kevin Durant. Like he would
I
come
mean,
in the
not
league
as
right
good
now.
as Kevin Durant ended up being, but
Well, I mean, I don't think he's as great as Kevin Durant, but he was that guy, that
he had the
long,
type
lanky
of
guy who could
yeah.
handle, and he was smooth, and he could pull up over you. And he doesn't get his like. I think if George Gervin played in the game today, he'd murk people. Like I and
And
that's a
I
guy
mean,
that played in the '70s.
I don't
So I mean,
disagree.
and
I think I think
and
if
the
he's
lack
not
of big
considered,
men. I mean, you've got some
if
very talented big men today. Like you've got Jokic and all that. Like I think Jokic, could possibly be one of the greatest passing big men. I mean, other than probably Kevin McHale. Um, but I mean, I think if you put him back, a lot of these big men today, outside of two or three guys, like they get wrecked. Like they just get absolutely dominated. Like, and
yeah,
I'm not talking about
center
Shaquille
was a
O'Neal. I'm
much
not
more
talking about
loaded
like, well,
position back then.
you put him up against Shaq and like
Well, I mean, if
you put anybody up against Shaq. I mean, it's other
if
than
you
the
look at most people's top 10 players of all time type of list, there's several centers in there. You
yeah,
know, like
no,
it
yeah,
used to be, and then if 10 years from now, if you ask somebody, if you ask like a 20-year-old now, be 30 years old, 10 years from now, if you ask him for his top 10 players of all time, there's probably not going to be very many centers in the list. I don't think so.
no,
Not that I don't think that that should be how it should be. I'm just saying that the game has changed, the way it's played has changed, and
yeah,
center is
I
just
don't,
a.
yeah, but it just goes back into like that's just it's like a pet peeve of mine when people disparage older players because of the way the game has evolved now, saying like, oh well, they couldn't keep up now, like
I
like
think that's fair to say for some role players back in the day, but like
well, like
like
yeah,
like
some
I've
role
already said,
players, but I mean that's fair to
the
say about
top
some role
players.
players today. You're not rolling out Patrick Connaughton out in the '70s, and he's not dropping 40 a game. That's I mean, it's nice to look at it like that and say like, oh well, like he would probably be more skilled. But you also got to take into the effect of like, you put a guy today back then, they're not going to have the same advantages. They're not going to have AAU and basketball camp and all the health advantages. Like LeBron probably wouldn't be doing what he's doing right now if it was 1970s because he'd probably be having a cigarette after a game. Like that's just the way it is. Like these players today are so much more prepared. And I mean, you're basically taught from a young age. I mean, I know you had basketball camp when you were younger. Like I went to basketball camp when I was a kid. Like a lot
Didn't
of that
work out
shit.
as well for me as it did for LeBron, but
Well, yeah, but yeah, well, obviously LeBron's,
but yeah, I went to
yeah,
basketball
you get
camp
what
for
I'm
sure.
saying. Like
Yeah, yeah.
it's it's not comparable. Like guys like Wilt and Bill Russell. Like, oh well, Bill Russell won all those rings. There was only 9 teams, and like he couldn't play today. Like that's ridiculous.
He could play today,
That's
but
ridiculous.
he wouldn't have nine
No, I don't think
rings
he
though.
has. Yeah, I don't think he has. I don't think
But
he has 11
yeah, he
rings.
could like that. That's what yeah, that no. I have
Will
fun.
Chamberlain would like oh well he was dropping 50 on garbage pail workers like
I have fun with the like like the players that were role players in the 70s would be attorneys, if they were in the league, right? If they were trying to be in the league right now, they'd have to go pick a different job because they wouldn't be in the league. I have fun with that all the time. Just because I I see so many people regurgitate this, this bloodbath of the NBA and what it used to be because they're so like those are the clips that go viral on social media now, whenever you bring up old clips, like nobody's watching old clips of soft defense from the 80s and the
Oh yeah,
90s. Like
yeah.
nobody cares
There
about
was
that
bad.
at this
There
point.
was bad D
So
back then. Don't get it
if you
twisted.
didn't watch that, or if you don't take the time to go look it up, if you didn't watch it, there's a lot of people that I really think, just based off what they say, think that like every minute of every game was just a bloodbath in the NBA in the regular season
Well, they
back
see the
then.
clips of the Pistons, like they think every team played like the Pistons, and
Yeah,
it's
and
not.
it's just like I said, like for every 10-minute clip of look what defense they had to play against. If you take the time to go look, there's a 10-minute clip of the opposite of it too. And so I don't think the gap in like competitiveness and intensity and things like that is as small or as big as people make it out to be,
See,
from now
I
compared to
think
the
that's the
90s.
biggest gap to me. That's the biggest gap, and that's the biggest difference is the competitiveness. Like
I don't agree at all,
I
man.
don't
Like, are
think
you
guys
saying
are as
because teams are
competitive.
like teaming up and stuff like that? Is that your reason?
No, no, I don't because I mean, like, there's always been teams like there's always been Lakers and like there's always been teams
So
like
why?
that.
What are you using to judge to think that these guys don't want it just as bad?
It's just the intensity level of it. It's just it doesn't seem.
There's nothing. It doesn't get any better. There's no more intense, no better basketball to watch than playoff basketball in the NBA.
Well, yeah, yeah, like in the playoffs, but I mean, I'm talking about like these like if you go pull up a random game back then, it was like that. Like it was playoff level basketball.
No, not every single random game. No
I
shot.
think I
There
think
were plenty of down games back then too. There were
yeah,
plenty of down regular
Magic went
season
at
game.
it. Giannis went at it.
The
And see, I got spoiled, I guess. Like I shouldn't
you
compare.
yeah you watched you watched Bulls games, and
Yeah,
most of
I
those
know that's
were
what I'm saying. Like
most
I
of
was
those
about
were
to say
high
that.
intensity. They
I
were
was
the
gonna
best
say
team in the league.
I shouldn't say that because
There were
I watched Jordan
plenty.
and like that's just a different level of competitive. Like that's the level of competitiveness I grew up with is
I mean,
watching that.
there's nobody more competitive than Jordan, and Kobe was right there.
Yeah,
He was the same. Like there,
you can see my grandma. Like my grandma,
those were once in
for
a
whatever
lifetime
reason.
type of players, and we somehow got to see two of them in our
Yeah,
lifetime.
yeah. Well, see,
Like that.
that's what I was gonna say, and like I got to see it like closely because for whatever reason, my grandmother was obsessed with Phil Jackson. Every time we would turn on a game, whether it was Lakers or Bulls, and she would see Phil Jackson, she would go, "Well, there's that handsome man. We're gonna watch this." And it wasn't even about basketball. Like she likes basketball, but it was just about watching Phil Jackson on the television. So, like literally, like
Worked out well.
yeah, like I grew up watching Bulls games, and then whenever he went to the Lakers, I grew up watching Lakers games. Which I mean, I'm more of a Bulls fan, I guess technically, if you want to call it that. Like, I'm not really a fan of a team in basketball anymore, but
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, growing up where we grew up at is kind of tough. I was always, I was the same way, man. Like for every other college, college sport or professional sport, whatever, I've always had a favorite team my entire life, but I've never, ever had a favorite NBA team. It's always been NBA players. Um, when I was kind of Jordan by default whenever I was younger. Like my parents bought me a Jordan jersey. I've got I've got a school picture in it. Like it was. I didn't know much about basketball whenever Jordan was in his prime doing his thing. I was. We're talking about like whenever 1998. I was 7 years old. So I knew that I liked playing basketball. I knew the fundamental. I knew the small amount of fundamentals, and I knew that number 23 on the Bulls was better than anybody else. So it was kind of like MJ by default was my favorite player whenever I was younger. But once I kind of got older and started doing more watching, um, and it was, became a bigger mix of watching and playing versus just playing really. Yeah, I started to gravitate toward Kobe obviously was the big one, but then Vince Carter and Tracy McGrady too were like two other kind of like Kobe was my favorite throughout that era. But I
yeah, see,
loved
like
T Mac. I
see,
loved Vince Carter.
I couldn't get into T Mac because
Um,
I like he just seemed like he didn't give a shit, man. Like,
he just always got hurt, man. But God, he was
oh, he
so
was.
good. And he was so fun to watch whenever he was out there.
My favorite
Um,
player post Jordan, and people are gonna laugh at me about this, but only real ones know. Like if you know, you know, and if you don't, then you're not on our level. Like I'm just being completely honest. Like because people want to think that like football was my first love. Basketball is my first love. Like I grew up playing basketball. I grew up watching basketball. That's what I before I got so obsessed with football. Obviously, football is my favorite. That's what my family did was basketball and Cardinals baseball. Um, So my favorite player post Jordan, when I was a kid, Jordan left, 98, whatever. Grant Hill. And I like
See, how could you hate T-Mac then?
I, no, I'm not saying I hated. I didn't say I hated T Mac. I'm saying like he was very like T Mac was like lackadaisical as far as like his
I don't know if he
competitiveness.
was lackadaisical,
Like
but
he just seemed
I
like
feel like
it was
Grant Hill and
it was his
T-Mac had
eyes,
two
man. It
very
was it was his
similar.
eyes. He just seemed like he wasn't there.
I
I'm
feel
not
like
saying that
T-Mac and Grant Hill had two very similar career trajectories. It's just why it was really interesting to
injuries,
hear you
man.
bring him up.
Injuries.
Yeah,
Grant
yeah.
Hill, man.
He
That
would have been one of the
dude,
better players of all time if he got to
all
play.
time. I'm talking
Yeah,
like top five all time.
I agree.
My mom
I agree.
hated it because he played for Duke.
Yep,
And
yep.
my mom can stand me liking Grant Hill, but
He
I've
was
got
a
a
lot of fun to
old
watch, though.
I've got an old ass Grant Hill Pistons, like the old teal Grant Hill Pistons jerseys. I mean, this thing is probably like the size of like a 10-year-old. Like, there's no way I can wear it now. But
Yeah,
man, like I loved Grant Hill back then. And Scottie Pippen, I always loved Scottie, even when he went to Houston and like even or when he went to Portland. Um, I I tried to support him as long as I could. I was a big Scottie Pippen fan. Mike Bibby was another dude. I loved watching Mike Bibby play back in the day. Was a big Mike Bibby fan. Trying to think of all like the guys that like I was a fan of when I was a kid. First pair of basketball shoes I ever owned were everybody's first pair. Usually is Allen Iversons. I had some AI threes when I was like 20.
yeah. AI was a lot of. I never purchased any AIs. I did buy a pair of them blue T-Max, but
Yeah, yeah. I had some
I
old.
didn't get a
It
pair
was
of
it was
AIs.
white, straight
But
white, clean AI threes with a little
yeah,
silver three on the side.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. AI is always. It's hard
yeah,
not to have
man.
him on your list just because of how fun he was to watch. But
Yeah, I used to love basketball, man. I just don't know what it is anymore. Like,
I've still got that love for it, man. My favorite player has been very, very consistent for a long time now. For his
I think that's
like
one
I
of the
said,
reasons I don't have a favorite player. And
yeah,
a lot of it too is like I used to, and we can get into like the Kentucky basketball thing, but like I don't want to be here till midnight. It's I used to love, watching kind of like Darius Miller, Jody Meeks, and like I would love
Tayshaun
to.
Prince is number one for me, man.
Darius Miller is my favorite UK basketball player.
Darius Miller's number two, but Tayshaun Prince is my favorite UK player of
Just,
all time.
you
But
would
yeah,
watch and you would grow with these dudes, and then you'd
yeah,
follow.
college doesn't give you that
Yeah,
opportunity anymore.
yeah. Like I can't get into it because then
Yeah,
you
I've
follow
kind of
these
moved on. I've
guys.
made peace with that.
Yeah, I mean, so it's hard for me to enjoy because now I just pull it up and it's some random. I think if I had to pick a favorite player, like if you had a gun in my head, I had to pick a favorite player. I'd probably say Morant. Like I
He
probably
he would be number two for me behind KD.
I'd
Yeah,
probably root for Ja just because from
Murray
the
State.
area. Yeah,
Yeah,
and then if it wasn't him because of the local thing, I'm trying to think, damn, probably Devin Booker.
yeah. Book's a lot of fun to watch too, and then
Booker or
he does
Steph
have that
Curry.
Kentucky connection. Steph is a lot of fun. I like, yeah,
Steph's fun to watch.
yeah. I
I
think there's
hate
a lot
shooting
of
three.
players that
I hate
are,
on shooting threes too.
but
But
he's the best at it
but
though,
see,
so it's all
that's
right
the
if he
thing
does
is
it.
like everybody thinks that they're like Steph. Like that dude. That dude changed. Everybody's like, oh, Steph Curry changed the game, and I'm like, yeah, he made it worse because now everybody thinks they're that dude, and ain't nobody that dude.
He did change it though. I mean, I don't know. I've had a lot of like quote unquote favorite players in the league over the years. It's been like it was kind of MJ by default whenever I was younger, and then it kind of translated to Kobe. But like while Kobe was my favorite player, I loved T Mac, I loved Vince Carter, I loved I loved Dwight Howard. Whenever his Orlando days, Dwight Howard in Orlando was some of the
Good
most
day.
fun to watch. Man, like he
I remember
wrecked havoc.
I was on a camping trip whenever they knocked Cleveland out of that Eastern Conference Finals. I had it up on my phone watching it, and everybody's like, "You're supposed to be camping. Like, why are you watching this?" And that's what I'm saying, man. Like, I was obsessed with basketball, and
Yeah,
uh,
yeah. I mean, and
man, it all went
for
downhill. The Derrick Rose injury, bro.
the
It,
minute
it ended.
like my NBA fandom changed for good for the rest of my life. Like so I was born in Seattle, Washington, well, like 10 minutes out of Seattle, Washington. Um, And so kind of by default, once I got into sports, my favorite teams I had in place, but like that whenever I would like, I want to find other teams to root for, whenever my team isn't playing them, I kind of defaulted to Seattle other than football because, the Rams, the Seahawks, like there's just no way. But like the Mariners are my second favorite MLB team. And at the time, the Sonics were like my kind of like, hey, that's like my team. Like St. Louis, the sports city that I love. Now that I'm kind of really into sports, doesn't have an NBA team, but the city I was born in does. So um, I'll kind of pay attention to them. And they drafted Kevin Durant and he went to the Thunder, and I was like, okay, I'm going to pay attention to Durant because I liked him in college. It was at the point where I was watching a lot of college basketball whenever he was in there. I haven't watched as much here lately, but like whenever Durant was in college, I was really involved with college. Kentucky was, doing well as well. It was a lot more fun to kind of follow college at the time. And then I remember there was a playoff series I watched early on in OKC where they ran into Kobe in the playoffs and the Lakers beat them in the playoffs, I think in like 6 games. But I remember watching those games and watching Durant play. And I was just sitting there like, man, I have never had this much fun watching somebody play basketball in my life. And that moment, even though Kobe beat him and Kobe was like overall my favorite player in the league at the time, my fandom like switched basically to Durant that year. It was like, I think I want to say it was like 2010, 2011. I can't remember. I wish I could remember. Um, I'd have to look it up. But from that moment on, basically for like a decade now, I've never had this much fun watching somebody play basketball, man. And so he's been my favorite player for,
I can I can tell you the exact moment I stopped liking basketball. It is like I like whatever, like I'll catch shit for this, whatever. It is what it
uh,
is the moment LeBron did that press conference and went to
I
like,
knew you were going to say the
yep,
decision.
yep, yep, that was it. I was done after that. I couldn't watch it. I thought that was just such a weak fucking move. I, and I know you like Durant too. I think that shit is so weak. I think it is. I mean, it's fun to watch and it's cool if you like the dude, but
I don't think it's that simple at all. So I looked
I
at it.
think it is. I mean,
It was 2010 whenever OKC got beat by the Lakers, and I kind of really started to gravitate toward KD. Um, but I mean, I didn't plan on getting into this tonight, but I can't let you bring it up and not get
no,
into it.
I baited
But
you into it.
it's not just as cut and dry as KD, made the bitch move and left and chose the Warriors. Like I mean, Kevin Durant signed one max extension with OKC. Like he could have left earlier than that. He signed a max extension, made a long-term commitment, played out his contract, and instead of the team
I'm
showing
not
that,
saying
no, 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 no,
anything is
we already went down this. So I can't not defend him for this. And it like OKC during their tenure there, KD's really the only guy they wanted to pay. Like they traded away James Harden for pennies, especially for what he turned out to be. Um, they traded Serge Ibaka. Instead of signing guys to long-term deals to try to make the most, because they were all really young whenever they were doing this. Like it was clear they had a lot of years left. And if you go back and look at the pictures from whenever OKC and Miami played in the finals and look at how young those guys are, like they were way ahead of their time. They needed more time together, but OKC wasn't concerned about paying the money to make that happen. And then you look at places around the league where like Golden State is, they're in the luxury tax every year, making sure that their guys are taken care of once they did have to start paying guys, and they're over there leading the league in assists. This was the big thing for me. As much talent as they had, they moved the ball better than anybody in the league. They led the league in assists, and you're sitting there playing on a team that from a front office standpoint does the exact opposite as what Golden State's doing. And then on the floor, Oklahoma City's game plan is to basically do the exact opposite of what Golden State was doing. And KD and Westbrook basically, once Harden was out of the picture, especially KD and Westbrook just took turns, doing ISO ball every play. And Golden State was the exact opposite of that. Like, yeah, they were a 73 win team and, whatever and all that didn't win the championship. Just by the way, like the regular season was great, but they didn't win the championship.
yeah, but they did the
And
year before.
yeah, in
Don't
six
act like they
games.
weren't a championship team. That's all
they
you're
were a
living for.
championship.
But
They
see,
were
so
a
here's the thing
championship
though, because
caliber. They
I'm
were a
not
championship.
angry at
No,
Kevin
hang
Durant for
on.
leaving.
They were a championship caliber team, but they won that championship against LeBron without Kevin Love and without Kyrie, and LeBron still took them to 6 games. And then the next year, whenever they were both healthy, that same Cavs team beat that same Warriors team. So I'm not saying the Warriors weren't at the championship level. I'm just saying it's not like it was a foregone conclusion they were going to win the title already before KD showed up. It was once he showed up. But and it was the best team among the teams he could have went to. It was the most stacked team he could have chose. Like
Well,
there's no doubting
here's
that.
also
But
a problem with it, like that I had with it, is you remember that Western Conference series they had, Oklahoma City had a 3-1 lead in that series.
yeah,
And Kevin
I
Durant
remember.
didn't really show up those other games. Neither Westbrook especially didn't. But Durant didn't play his best ball when they blew that lead either. And so you're telling me like
He didn't play his best ball, and even not playing his best ball, he was still easily the best player on that team whenever they blew that 3-1 lead. And their negatives of the way that they try to play basketball and win basketball games really shine through whenever they lost that 3-1
yeah,
lead.
so here's the thing is like I don't fault him for leaving Oklahoma City. Like that's not what I like. Yeah, if you want to go, like go, it is what it is. But I mean, like he did, it stacked the league. Like no other team at that moment had a chance. And it like to me, like
There were still
basketball
plenty of
was
teams picking the Cavs, so I mean, people
yeah,
still
and
thought
they
at
were
least one
idiots
team had the
too. Like,
chance.
yeah,
But
yeah, they were idiots if they picked anybody but Golden State, because if you knew basketball, you knew what was happening. Like it was over. Because I remember the news broke whenever me and Ray were out golfing. Whenever that news broke, and I looked at Ray, and it's like, well, like, why even watch? Why even watch? Like, there's no even reason to watch the season. I mean, like, yeah, it
well,
was.
and it's not like he went and rode coattails to 2 titles either.
Well, I'm
Once he
not saying
got
he
there,
did. Like
like he
he
was
was
the
Finals
Finals
MVP.
MVP both years that they
Yeah,
won, and
he balled out. He did his thing, but
the first year specifically, Steph played pretty terrible in the
Wentz
finals.
played pretty bad in most of his finals.
The most recent one that they won together, the last one, Katie won Finals MVP. He played well enough to the point to where you could at least make an argument that he could have been Finals MVP. I think it was,
No,
it
I
was
get that.
KD,
Like
and
I
you could
get
say
that,
that. But
but
the last one he did play well. But other like pretty much
yeah,
every
like
finals up than
yeah,
that last
but
one,
if you're
he had to
telling me
play
like,
poorly.
but if you're telling me like, and this is where it's just like I'm different. Like if I blow a 3-1 lead to a 73 win team, I'm not joining them motherfuckers. Now fuck y'all. Like I'm coming back and going at your head. Like I'm not doing that. Like that's just me, and I don't agree with that move. I think to me personally that move is weak because to me is weak. Like I'm not doing that. Like if you beat me at something, I'm obscenely competitive. Like you know
See,
this. Like
I just don't. I don't
like
think that.
I'm obscenely competitive. Like
Like I'm sorry, man, but we're probably as competitive as we are. We're probably not more competitive. We don't have a bigger competitive spirit than Kevin Durant or LeBron James or like these guys that are making these moves. There's no way that we can sit here and say, oh, well, I'm more competitive than that guy. Like we don't know their competitive drive, man. We've
well,
never
I don't
sat in
know
the
them
same room with
personally, but
them.
I'm saying I'm not talking about them at a personal level. I'm saying like I don't know Durant.
We are talking about KD at a personal level. You just said
No,
if
I'm
you were
saying
him.
no, I'm saying that particular move
Right, exactly. And I'm not
I
saying you
wouldn't
can
do.
use that particular move to say, well, I'm definitely more competitive than him now because he chose to do that.
Well,
We don't know
I didn't say
anybody's
I'm more
competitive
competitive than
drive.
him. I didn't say I'm more competitive than him. I don't know him. I don't know his competitive level. I'm saying me personally, that move I wouldn't have done because I, me, look at that move, not Kevin Durant, look at that move
Made
as
by
weak. Like, and I couldn't do that. I would want if you tell me that I was on the verge of beating you and then I didn't play up to my standards and blew a 3-1 lead, and then I get to join you next year, like there's no chance. No. Fuck
I
it.
don't
I'm
know.
dead.
I'm
Like
just I'm
that's
very
why I like Damian Lillard. Like Damian Lillard's the same thing. Like he's like, man, he's like, I'll get put out of the playoffs every year, but I'm coming right the fuck back at you. Like
Yeah,
I'm
and
coming
probably won't win
at
a
you.
ring his entire career, but he's an incredible
Yeah,
player.
yeah, that's fine. But
But
I
I
mean,
mean,
did it
I disagree.
get his ring? But that's just that's where we're different.
I'm very pro player, and I think that you only get one chance to make a career in the NBA. And if you think that whatever situation is the best situation for you, I think no questions you should go do it. Include KD, LeBron. I didn't used to always think that way. When LeBron went to Miami, I didn't like it either. I didn't like Cleveland just because I already hated the Heat. They were probably my least favorite team in the league because of
Man, I hated
what
him.
what D Wade did to Kentucky in March Madness, knocking out what should have been the championship favorite, putting up a triple double for Marquette, and knocking them out of the March Madness, and then getting drafted by the Heat. I kind of hated the Heat from that point already. So like if LeBron would have went to somewhere other than the Heat, like even before they said Bosh is coming and all that, like not mad that they created a super team. I'm just mad he went to Miami because I hate Miami. So I don't know if I would have had as
And
strong of a
see,
feelings about LeBron if he would have went elsewhere. That one was really team
here's the
dependent.
thing
But
with that move is like it's another thing. Like, yeah, I don't agree with. I think it was basically stacking your odds, which like I
I mean,
get.
compared to what was in the league at the time, yeah.
Yeah, like I mean, it was pretty much a foregone conclusion. But that's not what pissed me off about it. And it wasn't even the decision, like the whole like spectacle with that pissed me off about it. It was after it all happened and they threw that fucking parade and they did
Not
the
four, not
not
five,
five,
not
not six,
six.
not seven. Like, man, that shit just set so wrong with me. Like, I
I hated it at the time too, just because it was the Heat. But like
like
I get
like
it, man. It was it was like a fan
the
of
inner
the
Kobe
thing,
Bryant
man.
in me,
Like
the inner Kobe Bryant in me was just like I wish I was born talented at like just a born an athletic freak like those guys were, and I could play basketball at that level because like my inner Kobe Bryant was just going bananas, and I was like, man, if I could get if I get one shot at Miami, like,
yeah, I
so
just hated Miami in
that's why
general.
I loved that Dirk thing. Like whenever they made fun of Dirk coughing and they were pulling all that bullshit in the finals with Dirk Nowitzki, like dude, I loved it. Like I watched every second of that finals, and I other than the games Miami won, I enjoyed every damn second of watching Dirk Nowitzki eviscerate that squad.
He played really well. Yeah, it was a fun series to watch. It's the only series that I think people make a lot of LeBron's finals record. I think that's the only series where he truly played poorly, and
Yeah,
that
yeah,
loss should be held against him. I don't think the
yeah.
other loss, like that's a whole nother long debate, but I don't
Oh,
think
yeah.
LeBron's finals record should be a negative on his on his player resume,
No, I'd
despite
rather
it
lose in
being.
the championship game than lose in the first round.
Yeah, yeah, and it's not like you can make a very, very, very valid argument that I think LeBron probably wouldn't even argue with based off what I've heard him talk. Like would have heard him talk about his own performance in that series. I don't think he would even argue with you, that he did play poorly in that series. But the other ones
Yeah.
that they lost,
That's the series that keeps him from ever being the greatest of all time in my eyes. I
and that's a tough argument to disagree with because Jordan, like that's another thing that I've always hated about the whole like, oh, he's 6 for 6. It's like, well, yeah, but
well,
he
yeah, I
didn't play
don't. But
6 years. No, but I'm agreeing with you at the end here once we
yeah,
get to the end. But like like MJ didn't only play 6 years in the league,
right.
so like why are we making this argument? And then why are you mad at LeBron because instead of losing in the first round, he lost in the finals? Like, but every time MJ made it to the end, he never had a bad final series.
Well,
Like he
see,
played
here's
out of his mind every
exactly
single
that's
time.
the thing is like MJ took his lumps, and I mean, people don't really understand what the Bulls organization was until
There's a reason they were high enough to pick Michael Jordan in
there's
the
a reason they
draft
were
whenever
high
they
enough
got him.
yeah, there's a reason they were high enough to pick Scottie Pippen and a bunch of those dudes. Like and Scottie Pippen, like, and everybody wants to be like, well, Michael didn't win until he got Scottie. Go look up Scottie Pippen's numbers that first title against the Lakers. Go look up those stats, and
Well, I mean,
you'll know
there
why.
is some sense to that argument
Well,
because
yeah, I mean, he
Scottie
needed to
Pippen is a
go,
lot more than what shows up
but
on a stat sheet, though.
this is why it was different to me, and this is why I'll always put Michael Jordan. And I mean, Bill Russell's got more rings. There's other dudes that
We
got
can't
more.
get into this debate right now. We're
Yeah,
like
there's other
two
dudes that got.
hours
It's not
deep.
about the rings. It's not about the rings. It's once Michael Jordan learned like kind of like LeBron. Like once Michael Jordan learned how to win, that was it. The only chance anybody ever had up until he retired after 98 was him retiring. Like that was it. Like
But using the reason why I kind of disagree now is using that argument. I truly think that series against Dallas is where he kind of learned his biggest lesson in his career. Like even like they were
yeah,
the
humbled.
favorite, they should have won. But I felt like in that loss, he kind of learned what it was like to win because that was the first time he'd ever played in the finals and actually had a shot at winning. Like the finals teams that he took to the finals before going to
Yeah,
Miami.
yeah.
It like yeah, I think like LeBron would never say, "Oh, I knew I was losing those," but like we knew you were
Come
losing
on.
those,
You should have
you
never
know
beat the Pistons.
and that was the first series, the first finals where he actually had a shot at winning, and he didn't perform well. And I think that was really where he took
Well, I think he thought it was going to be easier than what it was. I
right.
think that's why he
Yeah,
signed up for, and that to me is why like it was a weak move. Like it's weak is because he got there and he thought like, oh well, I got Wade, I got Bosh, I can just kind of play whatever, and we're just going to blow this team out. And from a competitor standpoint, like the way I look at stuff like that, like that's weakness to me. Like if you're not going 1,000%, what are you doing there? Like what are
yeah,
you there?
yeah. I just like I don't know. After you get past that one series against the Mavs, I don't think that there's a playoff blemish on LeBron's resume either. Um, but
No, yeah, the
MJ
team,
has, as far as
most of the
finals
teams that he's
goes,
lost to
MJ
are
has
the
none.
better teams, like the Golden State teams, and they like really like they shouldn't have beat they shouldn't have beat that Golden State team that won 73 games. Like that was just a colossal collapse. And then of course like the Draymond Green shit. We can get into that series. But I mean that Spurs team with Ray Allen hitting that shot, like there's a lot of stuff like and I don't hold that against LeBron. Like a lot of people like they'll say like, oh,
No, because I mean
praise
that
LeBron.
was
It is
game
like it is,
six.
yeah, like it is what it is.
And
But
LeBron turned on an incredible
hey,
performance in that
yeah,
game
yeah,
7 after
right.
Ray
So I
Allen hit
mean,
that shot. So it's like,
yeah. So I'm
they
saying
still
I
had to
don't.
win another game. Like I
Yeah,
get what you're saying.
but I mean, so he's won a couple finals. You know, I'd say probably half of his finals wins were over teams that they had no business beating.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you look at the betting favorites, I remember I saw a graphic about this a long time ago, but if you look at the betting favorites of the finals that they had played in, LeBron had only been the favorite in like 2 of his final appearances, and Jordan was the favorite, I'm pretty sure, in all 6. Like the Bulls were favored. Now, granted, like it's not a knock against Jordan. They were favored because they had Michael Jordan.
Yeah, because of Jordan.
Um, but like the team, team things with team building was just different back then. Um,
That's why, man. Like that's why, I love
and
it,
so
man.
I like
Love it.
LeBron had to
Like
go up against some ridiculous teams in the
my
finals.
favorite final series that you like, and see, you can pull up all these games mostly on YouTube.
YouTube's got like
Yeah,
basically all of them.
yeah. So you can pull up all these games. My favorite series to watch Michael Jordan in the finals was the Portland series because everybody talked about Clyde Drexler and how he was on that level of shooting guard that Michael Jordan was on. And they said, these two guys are going to go at each other all finals. They're going to be right at each other. And like that, it was just over after that because Michael Jordan just he took that so personal, like that meme, like in the
I took that personally.
yeah, I took that personally. He really did, and that's why like I
That dude took
love.
everything personally,
Yeah,
man.
exactly. Like and that's why like I love it. Like that's that level of competitiveness that
He put together a whole ass Netflix series just to like
shit on LeBron.
be petty toward whoever he wanted to be petty toward, like Isaiah Thomas and LeBron and whoever.
Oh,
Like
look, fuck Isaiah
look,
Thomas. Like
LeBron just won a ring. They're talking. He just pulled off this 3-1 comeback. They're talking about he's the GOAT. So he called, like, hey, ESPN,
roll that footage.
I'm finally gonna give y'all the go. Go ahead.
Roll that footage.
Like during the damn championship parade from the
Yeah,
Cavs,
yeah,
Michael's on the phone like, hey, he's doing his best Draymond impression out in the parking lot after losing the finals, calling KD like, hey, go, you did come play Golden State. MJ was like, hey, cut the tape.
yeah.
Like
Well,
these young kids
they
are bullshit.
they need to know,
And
and that's why you won't ever see anybody over the age. Well, let me rephrase that. You won't see anybody smart over the age of 31 call LeBron James the GOAT. Because if you were at that age, if you were 7, 8 years old, I would probably say would be like the cutoff towards the end of Jordan's career, and you were watching, like you knew. But if you were older than that, like you happen to actually kind of understand what was going on, like in those late 90s. Like obviously, like I was still too young for the early 90s, but those late 90s runs, um, I knew what was going on.
Yeah, I
And
mean, I depended on YouTube and ESPN Classic. Like I
yeah,
saw
and that's the thing
more.
is, like, even if you're young, like
I saw
you
more.
can go back and watch this shit just because somebody didn't grow up. You were only 1 years old during the 1991 finals. How the fuck do you even know what basketball? How do you even know what that was? Motherfucker, they're on YouTube. You can go watch them right now.
Yeah, I
Don't
like growing up. Whenever whenever I was still living with my family, we had like Direct TV and stuff. Like I watched more MJ games in my late teens on
right.
ESPN Classic than I watched growing up as a kid. Like I knew MJ was a really good basketball player whenever I was a kid, but like I couldn't grasp how incredible the things he were doing was. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, most of
Like
what
I
I
didn't
learned about MJ happened whenever I was 15, 16, 17, 18 years old.
yeah, I wasn't alive for like the 80s finals. Like I didn't watch Magic Johnson win the finals in the 80s. I wasn't alive then. You know how many games I've seen of Magic Johnson winning playing in the finals? All of them. I've watched every single. I To an extent, unless it's just like complete, like you completely can't find it. I've actually watched every single NBA finals from like 1972 on. I've seen them all, and it's just that's used. I used to be about basketball. I am about football now. Um, just like obsessed. Like I was just a film junkie. That's just what I like to do is just watch film. So I think it's just because I mean, I was athletically gifted as far as like other sports, like running and soccer and like all that stuff. But I mean, I was never as great, which I mean, I never really applied myself at football. I mean, who knows? But I was never as talented at basketball and stuff as I was, you know, at soccer and running. Um, but so but those were my favorite sports. So obviously I couldn't play them. So what's the next best thing I could do? Just immerse myself in them. Uh, and so it's we kind of got off topic, but I mean it's fun. I'll see. This is what I was talking about. We'll just bullshit around for a little
Yeah,
while.
it's been a while since we got to sit down and talk. And so, I mean, this is what's fun about doing this stuff, man. It's like we might not ever find somebody that's going to sit here and listen to 2 hours, but at least we got to get all the system and sit here and talk about sports for two
Right.
hours. We got to
That's
sit
all.
here and talk about the shit that we love to talk about. So
Yeah.
we could go for another hour
Oh,
and I'd be
dude.
just
Yeah.
fine. I'd throw it up on the internet with no shame. Like, I don't care if y'all hate the idea of a 3 hour podcast, man. I have fun sitting here talking about sports for 3 hours. So I'm sorry, skip, hit pause or hit stop whenever you feel like you're tired of listening. But I haven't been tired of talking. So, I mean,
No, we
it
can.
is what it is. We're not big enough to have to be podcastily correct. We can do we can
Well,
do what
no,
we
man.
want
Like,
over here.
well, I mean, if you listen to like I like listening to the Bill Simmons show. Like, Bill Simmons podcasts are like 3 hours long. Like
Yeah,
every
his is one of the longer ones. Yeah.
I'll listen to every fucking minute of it too. So
Yeah, that'd be a dream come true if we made it to his level in the podcasting world.
I
Jesus Christ, man.
yeah, him or Rogan. Yeah, like Rogan's
Yeah,
podcasts are like
Rogan is.
we're talking about some 3 hour podcast.
Yeah, he's on a whole other level of entertaining that I
Yeah,
couldn't ever dream of being.
Rogan's
That's
the
just one
fucking
of those
goat.
things
Well,
that.
Rogan, like he's great. Like he gets the guests.
Yeah, well, yeah, he's great at what he does, and then he brings on really great guests. For
He's
so yeah.
fantastic. I love listening to him. And I think the biggest we could possibly ever get would maybe be like the Pardon My Take guys. Like that's like
I,
the
will-
stratosphere
we're
for us.
we're definitely more sensible than those guys. I don't care what anybody says. We could get on a podcast and make a hell of a lot more sense than some of those guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
I
what
mean, and even
might not be able to generate as many clicks. But
we don't
you
have the
know,
bar stool machine behind us.
right? Yeah.
Prez, if you're listening, just go ahead and
If you need like a real sports broadcast and not like an entertainment broadcast that talks about sports, we're here for you.
Yeah, we got you, man. So, well, we'll go ahead and cut it there. We'll save some stuff for the next episode, and like Dr. Dre said, just chill to the next episode. Um, Speaking of chilling, if you're out there, especially during all this shit, stay warm, stay safe, stay off the roads. Um,
And if you made it this long, join us for a podcast. Like if you
Jesus
can listen
Christ,
to us
man.
this
Oh,
long, come
shit.
talk with us. Like there's no shot that anybody out there made it 2 hours. But if you did,
You
you need
got
to
some
let us
entertainment,
know. You need to let us know who you are so that you can come join us. Because if you can, chill and listen without being able to even talk to us for that long, it'd be great to,
especially through the
to
first
have you
part of this
on.
podcast, because it felt like that first part we were just like reading off a sheet, and we were just like, yeah, this player's good, this player's good, and then like kind of once we got into like this, we were just
Once
like,
we get to freestyle, the whole world's over. It's just like wrap it
exactly.
up.
We wrap that shit up, B.
We're gonna be here all night.
Yeah, we need to do this more often, just kind of go off the cuff.
Yeah. And one last quick plug. Don't forget, if you did make it this far, yeah, I'm sure you're already subscribed to one platform, but we're on Apple, we're on Spotify. This video version of this will be on YouTube here shortly. Go, the Experts podcast on all of them. Go like, go subscribe, go ring the bell on YouTube, go like the video, and comment on YouTube. Likes and comments help us out. So if you made it this far, clearly you want to help us out somehow just by listening for this long. So
Do it
drop some
now.
comments and let us know, where you disagree with stuff because
Do it. Do it
we like
now.
to talk on there too. So last quick shameless plug.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate everybody. Like I said, if you did make it this far, we appreciate you. Hit us up, get us in on. We'll get you in on the next one. And thank you guys for listening. And have a great night.